We're gonna
Go.
go through these
I think
headlines
I
here.
think Lakeisha just said something. I don't know if anybody heard that.
Go ahead,
I
Lakeisha.
said air horn.
Johan has a hot
Air
mic.
horn. She said air horn.
Oh,
Okay.
I say Johan has a hot mic.
Okay. What's up, Johan? Anyone got?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So anybody got a particularly interesting headline they've seen lately before we go through the big news articles?
Yeah, I think I sent you one in the afternoon. I mean, early on, but you didn't read it. 106 million personal data was lost in Thailand. Tourists.
Oh
So I guess
yes.
Asia and Thailand is involved.
Yes, everyone who's entered Thailand in the last 10 years apparently has now been leaked.
And I sent you one about the recharging roads for electric vehicles in Michigan.
Yes, that story is just like the fully electric tanker cargo ship out of Norway. Those two stories just keep coming back every week. It's back and back and back and back and back and back. And that container ship out of Norway, I'm convinced you guys were pulling a huge group prank on me because people were sending in that article for over 2 months every single day, which is bizarre. And this electronic roads in EV charging roads one definitely has a lot of traction as well. So we will get into it now, shall we? Yeah.
So that would be the second state because Indiana is the other one that was going to electrify their roads.
Yes, and there's a part of Sweden that's doing it as well, which Craig, who's who I just invited to join the stage, might know where exactly. Somewhere north of Stockholm, or Johan might recall. Do you remember where that was, Johan? Where they were testing out the roads that would charge?
Outside of Södertälje.
Oh, really? So just south of Stockholm, about an hour south.
Yeah, and you had Scania there.
Oh, the massive trucking company is there. Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. Okay, so the first the biggest story is the New York Times says they have sources that last month Mark Zuckerberg agreed to show positive stories about Facebook in the newsfeed in an effort to improve their image to their users. And there was a name for this. It was Project something or other, code name Project Amplify. And it was proposed in January. Several executives at the meeting were shocked by the proposal. One attendee said, Project Amplify punctuated a series of decisions that Facebook has made this year to aggressively reshape its image. Since that January meeting, the company has begun a multi-pronged effort to change its narrative by distancing Mr. Zuckerberg from scandals, reducing outsiders' access to internal data, and hold that thought, reducing outsiders' access to internal data, because 24 hours ago, we were in this room, were we not? And did we not have a headline 24 hours ago that Facebook has changed its code so that outside researchers can't use the main tool they've been using, which was a browser plugin that you or Cheryl or Lakeisha or Cami or anyone could install, which would allow the researchers to pull all the data from your Facebook pile and your Facebook experience as you use Facebook. And you knowingly would be wanting them to take the data. You're acting on their behalf. You're saying, sure, take all that you like from my Facebook and all of the stories that Facebook's sharing with me, so that you as a researcher can hopefully try and deconstruct what Facebook's doing. Because if you get enough users doing this together, you're smart at how you analyze the data, you could come to some rather interesting conclusions. Facebook originally shut that down, that team from NYU who was doing that, and another team in Berlin who was doing that, and then said, well, we don't really want to shut you down, but the big bad American agencies, are cracking down on us, and they said we can't do it. And then that, the FTC, the 24 hours later jumped on their website to point out that that's not true at all, that the FTC is not prohibiting Facebook from allowing those types of behaviors from researchers to do that. And so now they found a new way to stop those researchers by playing games with the code in the back end. And so, indeed, this rings true, that they're burying or reducing outsiders' access to internal data, and burying a potentially negative report about its content and increasing its own advertising to showcase its brand. And they're realizing, here's the quote, this is a great quote, they're realizing that no one else is going to come to their defense. So they need to do it and say it themselves. We're great. Facebook's awesome. Facebook's the good guys in the middle of your newsfeed. Brilliant. It's got a little North Korean flavor to it. I kind of like it. And that quote, by the way, is not from any random person. That's by Katie Harbath, a former Facebook public policy director. There was also another interesting revelation in this New York Times article, that there was a FTC decision which cost Facebook quite a bit of money, $5 billion or something like that, wasn't it? And it turns out that Facebook had agreed to pay this amount with the but as one of the conditions that Mark Zuckerberg wouldn't be targeted personally in the decision or anything like that. It's kind of an interesting additional point in that one. But that's the big story of the moment. The next biggest story, number 2, is from Reuters. And boy, is there egg on my face. Lithuania recommends ditching Chinese phones after finding that Xiaomi phones have the censorship capabilities that can be activated remotely. Let me unpack what this means. And there's more to this story. So let's jump to the very end of this story before we even read the beginning of it, because there's a little bit of additional cultural context that is kind of relevant here. That where is it? I think it's important to read the context first. Here it is. Relations between Lithuania and China. They were in the news recently together. It says relations between Lithuania and China have soured recently. China demanded last month that Lithuania withdraw its ambassador from Beijing, and said it would recall its envoy to Lithuania after Taiwan announced that it was setting up an office in Lithuania. And the Taiwanese mission in Europe and the United States used, and then the U.S. President Joe Biden, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, spoke to Lithuania's prime minister last week and stressed support for Lithuania in the face of pressure from China. So step A, what happened a few weeks ago was Taiwan set up an embassy in Lithuania, the first in Europe. And this kind of paves the road for, Taiwanese recognition as a sovereign independent nation, which China is working very hard to prevent. And so the fact that they set up an embassy in Lithuania, China's now got a huge...
They call it embassies, representative office or culture center usually.
Right. Yeah. Well, give it another week, because it's baby steps. You don't just launch nuclear bombs at China. You go baby steps. First, you open the office and you call it nothing. There's no office there at all. And then China says, no, we saw you open an office. And you're like, yeah, but that's just a toilet. We built a toilet there. That's all that is. And then like, no, that's not a toilet. You're going to do business there. Oh, well, it's an office. Okay, it's an office. And then next thing you know, it's a government office. And then next thing you know, it's an embassy. It's this crazy political cat and mouse game, because this is how you have to do it, and anyway, so they built this, whatever they call it. We know what it is. And by the way, they don't even call it Taiwan. They call it Taipei. It's the Taipei office. Sure it is. We all know what it is. why do we think Joe Biden's national security advisors patting them on the back for doing it? You think he really cares about them opening in just any old office? No, he knows what this is. This is the beginning of Europe recognizing Taiwan as an independent. Anyways, and that's why do you think China's upset? So China's gone so far as to force Lithuania to withdraw their ambassador, and China's going to withdraw their ambassador from Lithuania. So that's the background. And then the headline now, the second biggest story of today at this moment is Lithuania says, this is the actual headline from Reuters. Lithuania says throw away your Chinese phones due to censorship concerns. Lithuania's defense ministry recommends that consumers avoid buying Chinese mobile phones and advise people to throw away the ones they have now after a government report found that the devices had built-in censorship capabilities. Chinese phones sold in Europe by China's smartphone giant Xiaomi, which I've been a very vocal fan of, and Maria actually bought one. And we love our Xiaomi phones.
I know. I'm just listening to what you're saying.
And boy, are they an incredible value. A little too good to be true. And it turns out they might be too good to be true after all.
They can track on my nephew's football game watching, on YouTube. So it's okay.
Yeah. So flagship phones sold in Europe by Xiaomi have a built-in ability to detect terms and censor terms such as Free Tibet, Long Live Taiwan, Independence, Democracy Movement, and Lithuania's state-run cybersecurity said Tuesday the capability of Xiaomi's phone software has been turned off for the quote-unquote European Union region, but can be turned on remotely at any time. The Defense Ministry's National Cybersecurity Center said in the report, our recommendation is to not buy new Chinese phones and to get rid of those already purchased as fast as reasonably possible, said the Defense Deputy Minister, told reporters in introducing the report. Xiaomi did not respond to Reuters. Relations between Lithuania and China have soured recently. The report said the list of terms which could be censored and detected by the phones include 449 terms and is continuously updated. This is important not only to Lithuania, but to all countries which use Xiaomi equipment, the center said in the report. Okay. Very interesting indeed. Number 3 is...
But Tyler,
yes.
Just a quick thing on Xiaomi. And I don't know if anybody else from India is on stage, but when India banned TikTok, the Xiaomi phones, the Redmi phones, had TikTok inbuilt. I mean, pre-downloaded into it, and it was still accessible, even though the Indian government had said nobody can take it off place, download stores and stuff like that. And when the government went to it, they went, oops. But then when they released a new model, it was back on again. So not just censor their own thing, but also avoid local regulations through their phones.
So they're using it at the hardware as a Trojan horse to get TikTok into areas where the government has said don't bring TikTok.
Yeah.
They're preloading it.
Interesting. And that's interesting because if you join us every day, you know that one of the interesting things we're on the lookout for is a sincere question. And it's this, my goodness, should a investigative journalist, this is perhaps one of the best stories they could work on at the moment, is it not? Is to test how TikTok is create a new account for a 14-year-old or 15-year-old or 16-year-old. You do a bunch of different ages. This is not rocket science to do this, and do it in China and in other countries, the U.S., India. That would be very interesting. And let's see, and put in the same, pretend it's the same user. So put in, when you start, use the first search term as, I don't know, search for BTS, the Korean boy band. Okay, great. Second search term.
No, how about the first term being Free Tibet?
You could try that in each country. I assure you, you won't get any results in China. But
you want to get censored, Vinay? That's how you get censored, Vinay.
It's try it on a Xiaomi phone. Let's see what happens. But it's a really interesting idea. This idea that China is potentially using TikTok as a sort of cyber surveillance kind of a government or cultural influencer, which that's their words. They're worried that TikTok is influencing their own people. And that's why they just last week, the headline less than in the past few days was they're now limiting it down to 40 minutes per day and no use after 10 p.m. because they know TikTok is influencing their people. And the question is, are they also know how much it influences other countries, and are they taking advantage of that fact in kind of nefarious potential ways?
Can we unpack this just a little bit? Because this is a revelation, right? That they're preloading any TikTok especially, because that circumvents the curation of the stores, right? So they could be implanting stuff into that code. I'd be curious to have a researcher compare the code between pre-installed TikTok and maybe the corresponding version that matches that, because I know you can't compare apples to apples if the versions are different, but be very interesting to see if there's any code differences.
Okay, so the next story is that Netflix agrees to acquire the Roald Dahl Story Company, expanding on a 3-year deal to make animated shows with plans to create TV, movies, games, and more. And that might sound a little surprising to some people who don't join us every day, but if you join us every day, that makes perfect sense because we've been watching Netflix evolve into a gaming company where in the future this is a sign of more things to come. And this is what we predicted, which was, and I believe it was either Renjant or Johan who join us regularly, almost daily, have a habit of looking up job listings for companies and noticed that they were hiring for people with big, to be directors of video games for Netflix. And then sure enough, and that was a month ago. And now we're starting to see headlines that reflect this, like this one. There was one yesterday as well that making animated shows with plans to create TV, movies, games, and more around this new title, which makes all the sense in the world because they want to keep your eyeballs inside their app. And make no mistake about it, that is the battle. There's a battle for your ears and your eyes. And YouTube wants your eyes, and so does Netflix, and so does TikTok. And that's why YouTube just added what they call YouTube Shorts, which are like TikTok little videos. And that's why TikTok videos are getting longer. And that's why Instagram is now focusing more on videos. And it's why Netflix is making short little clips. They're all competing for your limited number of hours per day because they track those metrics, average viewer time. And by the way, the same happens in audio land. Spotify is in a battle for your ears, and kudos to Spotify for being the one who's like very early sort of established that as a rubric of like ear time, of like we want to dominate everything that comes into your ears, whether that be music. They started out with music, of course, just like Amazon started with books. But they've gotten big into podcasting. And in fact, one of the headlines in the past 24 hours is that Spotify just passed Apple as the new king of podcasts. There's more minutes listened of podcasts on Spotify than on Apple. And Apple created podcasts with the iPod. That's why they're called podcasts. So to give you an idea of how much of a head start they had. But now Spotify's leading and will continue to gain more market share in the podcast space over Apple because, in part due to the fact they acquired Anchor, this truly fantastic app and website that any podcaster can use to broadcast and edit their podcasts and help you create your podcast on every possible platform and blast them out simultaneously and give you all the analytics, all for free. It's truly magical. So
I think this is quite obvious by now that podcast is actually a portmanteau of the word broadcast and iPod.
Yes.
To what you're saying. So,
yes.
But I always found it really cute.
Yeah. And then you've got, in the case of Spotify, in the battle for your ears, that's why when Clubhouse came out, they couldn't. Every Swede who knows what was Spotify's DNA of wanting to dominate everything in your ears, when the social audio Clubhouse format came out, everyone in Stockholm was like, "Oh shit, Spotify's got to get into that game because that's in your ears. That's a battle for your ear time." So, and indeed, they did end up making a play in that space, and they're calling it live audio, and so is Amazon. Amazon's getting into the live audio space, and so is everybody. I mean, my goodness, everyone jumped on that train. And it's a big battle for your eyes and your ears. And Netflix has a very clever way to keep your eyeballs, which is making games out of their titles of their movies and their TV series on Netflix. And a lot of those could be converted into games. And that's a really clever play. So,
Tyler, I'm sorry. Is this the Oculus game that you're talking about?
That was
For
yesterday.
Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
You have any?
Yeah, I just read it right now.
JT, because I know that's really in your ballpark. That, by the way, that's a great point as well. These are not ordinary games that are coming in the future, because video games today and movies today, up until a few weeks ago, were predominantly on a flat screen. And games of the future and movies of the future and TV shows of the future are going to be in a more immersive VR-like environment. So the headline yesterday was that they're making a VR game out of a TV series title, which makes a lot of sense. Because, and by the way, as I mentioned last when we brought that up, those two worlds of video games and Hollywood and movies and film and TV are really coming right at each other. It's like two trains aiming for a collision, because as the game fidelity gets better and better and better and better and better, and it's starting to get to the point where you can put actors in there, and in fact there's examples of this already, and TV starting to become more like video games. They're going to merge. It's really wild. And Netflix needs to be a platform to enable all of that and be right in the middle of that. But so does YouTube, and so does Amazon with their Amazon Prime membership. They're in that battle as well. It's a multi-horse race. Disney Plus as well. So this headline from Variety that Netflix agrees to acquire this production company and expand on a 3-year deal. Is Michael still with us? Did Michael jump out?
He just finished a hard work with Amazon, and then she has to catch up with his beauty sleep now.
Yeah, because Michael's right there in LA working in this space, and is a big fan of VR as well. As you can't, if you're in Hollywood and you're not dabbling in VR, you're going to become a dinosaur very quickly. I mean, this is like same like with music and tech, like if you were in music and you weren't in tech, you're going to become a fossil relatively quickly. So, the next one is from the Register that VMware urges customers to immediately patch a critical file upload. Who cares? Next one's from Engadget. Facebook's oversight board, which is the group who made the decision as to whether or not to allow Trump on Facebook, because Facebook didn't want to make that decision internally. They kind of wanted to delegate that out to somebody. So they made this oversight board. And this oversight board, who makes a decision of who gets to stay on Facebook and not, and who's violating the rules or not, the oversight board wants Facebook to explain this new cross-check system, which reportedly lets celebrities, politicians, and others break its own rules, as was reported by the Wall Street Journal last week, was revealed. And because the Wall Street Journal is doing this series last week where they had 6 different articles about Facebook based on some insider info. They got a leaker inside who's sharing paper trails about all kinds of interesting revelations that we learned about Facebook last week, all of which make Facebook seem to be like a really shady fucking organization, by the way. That's what that series of 6 articles does, is it make Mark Zuckerberg look like somebody you wouldn't leave alone, wouldn't trust with anything. And just that it's a morally bankrupt company. And the rest of the press are kind of dogpiling on this point. And then Nick Clegg, who's their vice president of global affairs, came out with a statement which didn't really do much to address the issue, honestly. And then they came out and did a story that we have 40,000 team members addressing this issue, and we've spent billions of dollars addressing all these issues that we're being accused of. Yeah, well,
yeah, for context of people not from the UK, or I think Nick Clegg used to be a British politician. He used to run the Liberal Democrat Party, and he had a power sharing agreement where I think he was deputy prime minister for a while with James Cameron. So just for context, and then when all that fell apart, they didn't win the election, and his party basically lost all their seats. He got a big job at Facebook.
David Cameron, Cal, but yes, absolutely.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And you remember the famous
what did I
quote?
say? Which Cameron did I say?
You said James, but
oh no, yeah. Sorry.
Remember
not the
famous quote, which was
James Cameron.
I was wondering whether the Nick Clegg was the same all this time. I should have checked, but yeah, I guess
it is, man. It is.
But Cal, look what happened when you miss tech news around the world for weeks.
No,
yeah, I can't even say the right name. I've lost Cal, all my hair.
So really the James Cameron name is okay because Nick Clegg was like with the Titanic and sank with it.
Okay, that works.
So it's interesting though that Facebook's oversight board is now asking Facebook to explain this cross-check system. They think it would be kind of relevant for them to know that there's a whitelist of folks or a VIP list of.
Yeah, that was and it dovetailed with what we talked about from Charles's Substack article earlier, Tyler, right, with Ben Shapiro on the whitelist. I do an observation on the press release that Nick Clegg put out. We've got 40,000 people working on that. It's like the analogy being, we got a massive fire. We got thousands of fire guys at it. I mean, it's just, it's a funny kind of rebuttal to what's going on.
Well, there was, in relation to that, this kind of like backdoor dealing, because Charles is, one of his strong points is that Ben Shapiro, who's kind of wins each day on the most engaged piece of content on Facebook, basically has a kind of blessing of Zuckerberg, and that's why Shapiro never says anything negative about Facebook, and that it gets more interesting from there. And somewhat related, there's a book coming out about Peter Thiel, and the New York Magazine, did a piece about this Peter Thiel book. And I'll just read you a really interesting snippet that I can retweet for you right now from the Tech News Twitter account so you can read it yourself. It says, in 2019, while on a trip to Washington, D.C. to answer questions from Congress about his digital currency, Peter Thiel joined Mark Zuckerberg and Jared Kushner and Donald Trump and their spouses at the White House. The specifics of the discussion were secret, but as I report in my book, Peter Thiel later told The Confidant that Zuckerberg came to an understanding with Jared Kushner during dinner. Facebook, Zuckerberg promised, would avoid fact-checking the political speech, thus allowing Donald Trump's campaign to claim whatever it wants. Kind of tell mistruths. Not that Donald Trump would ever lie about anything or make any kind of mistruthy statements. But Facebook isn't going to police check any of that. And in return, the Trump administration would lay off any heavy-handed regulations of Facebook. And then sure enough, right at the end of Trump's term, Facebook, kicked Trump off. And although they delegated that decision to the oversight board, and then Facebook has a suit with the FTC, and Facebook had long seen the article continues, Facebook had long seen itself as a government unto itself. Now, thanks to the understanding brokered by Peter Thiel, the site would push what the Thiel confidant called a state-sanctioned conservatism. So some backdoor dealings between Zuck and Trump. Kind of an interesting insight on that one.
Hey, Tyler, did you know that William Randolph Hearst banned any mention of Citizen Kane on any of his publications? Just saying.
No. Funny. Fantastic movie, though, in which historically, that was an Orson Welles film that if you haven't seen, it's one of the best films of all time. And it's about William Randolph Hearst, and, it kind of paints him out to be, a child who didn't get enough love, and that's why he turned into, the kind of figure that he is. Rosebud, the sleigh. You have to see the film. What a fantastic movie. So the next big story is that the Mac OS is susceptible to running arbitrary code when a user opens a malicious file, and Apple's first attempts to silently fix the issue have failed. So your Mac device, not your phone, but your non-phone, meaning your laptops, are hacked, essentially. And the next one from Mac Rumors says that iOS 15.1, which you don't have yet unless you're a developer, but you will before long, probably in the next few weeks, lets users store their verifiable health records, including COVID-19 vaccination cards and test results, in the Health app. Now that there's a whole bunch of municipalities that allow for these COVID vaccine passports, now you're going to be able to have them right in your iPhone in just a few weeks when iOS 15.1 comes out. So the next story is that Microsoft uncovers a massive phishing operation offering phishing as a service subscriptions or one-time tools based on over 120 templates for just $80. This is going to lead to, if you thought hackings were happening a little too frequently already, it's about to get a lot worse. So the next one,
this has been around for quite a while, actually, but not 130 variants. The ones that I've been seeing have been about 30 to 40 variants on the same site. And you can actually target exactly what information you want extracted when you're ordering the kit, and they guarantee that it is not stopped by any anti-malware and antivirus, because they actually transmogrify the code each time they use it. Johan.
Thank you, Johan. So the next one is from the Wall Street Journal. The FCC says it's reviewing Zoom because of their proposed acquisition for $15 billion of a U.S. software company called Five9, citing Zoom's ties to China. And in the article, it points out that the U.S. government doesn't allow anyone in the government to use Zoom for anything because of their ties to China, nor does SpaceX because of its ties to China. And let me find the interesting bit of the story. The headline says, Justice Department team is looking into whether Zoom's China ties could make its acquisition of the software company a national security risk. In response to questions about its links to China, Zoom has emphasized the U.S. citizenship of its China-born chief executive, Eric Yuan. The U.S. government has been ramping up security of Zoom's China ties. The Justice Department last year charged one of Zoom's China-based executives with conspiring to disrupt Zoom calls about Tiananmen Square. Say what? Why is Zoom trying to meddle with Zoom calls about Tiananmen Square? If they have no ties to China, why would they care? Why are Zoom executives meddling with Zoom calls about Tiananmen Square?
Tyler, how are they doing it? Are already scheduled Tiananmen Square call with subject on it, text on it, or anyone mentions Tiananmen Square in the call would get disrupted? How are they doing it. And then I think a lot of Zoom's ethical and moral standard are in question then if they're doing it. First, they are recording and parsing all of these data without the knowledge. I've read that Zoom consent form, and nowhere it says that they can actually run this text or the audio through an algo, which can help them identify these keywords. So that's not there in their agreement statement. So that it's a lot of issues there.
So here's
The
the new.
timing is, I was just going to say real quickly, the timing is really sensitive. I mean, because Zoom has become a verb, right? And so just because it's become such a market leader over this past year. So if the US government had serious concerns last year, my question is why did it take so long, for them to at least start to proceed down this pathway, because I think it's going to be really difficult to kind of break people from the habit of Zooming. I mean, I know if I get a meeting request and it's on, Microsoft Teams or on Google Meet, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I could use that. But Zoom is the market leader, and so it's going to be really, it's going to be an interesting dance to see how this plays out.
So here's the New York Times.
Sorry, there's an article in April, Tyler and group, that really Zoom had admitted that in April this year that they were moving there's an ambulance going by, that they were moving some of their data and traffic through their data centers and servers through China because of the surge in volumes. So it really does look like they've started to rely on a lot more stuff going through their China.
So here's the New York
centers,
Times,
and hence the problem.
Here's the New York Times article. Zoom accused of disrupting calls at China's behest. U.S. prosecutors have charged a company executive based in China with conspiring to terminate Zoom meetings about Tiananmen Square massacre. In a novel case, federal prosecutors on Friday brought criminal charges against an executive at Zoom, accusing him of engaging in a conspiracy to disrupt and censor video meetings commemorating one of the most politically sensitive events in China. Prosecutors said the executive, Zhejiang Jin, who is based in China, fabricated reasons to suspend accounts of people in New York who were hosting memorials on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square massacre and coordinated with the Chinese officials to identify potential problematic meetings. At least 4 meetings commemorating the massacre this year were terminated as a result of Mr. Jin's actions. Mr. Jin, who is also known as Julian Jin, acted as the liaison between Zoom and the Chinese government authorities. He is identified in the criminal complaint only as an employee of a U.S. telecommunications company. Zoom confirmed on Friday that it was the company. So Zoom confirmed they are the company that he works at.
Yeah. By the way, Tyler, there's a person in the audience, Anjani Kumar, who's based in China. He just DM'd me that Zoom free version is banned in China. If you want to use Zoom, it has to be a paid one, either from externally from China or third party in China. Then they route all China-based calls from special servers. So anyone talking from China would have the data flowing via these servers in China, so they can parse and take a look at every piece of words that were used.
Yeah, and then the Guardian in the UK, the headline says, Zoom shuts accounts of activists holding Tiananmen Square events. 3 campaigners accuse U.S. firm Zoom of disrupting their access to platform to placate China. So now you know why the U.S. government is and why SpaceX has a ban on using Zoom, and why the U.S. government does, and why the U.S. government, the FCC, is investigating Zoom acquiring an American company. So just a little extra background to that headline that most the journalists themselves didn't really.
Tyler, this feels like the markets are not paying attention to this specific headline, right? So the stock price is not moving much today, but they had a downer at the end of August when they announced the slowdown. So they went down 17% then. So and they're down from their absolute peak of 550 a while back. But this is one of those where some of the headlines here, and there's no investment advice here at all, zero, like just saying that. But sometimes we see things early. I mean, because this is quite serious. I mean, like nobody's paying attention to it. Is there a reason? Am I missing something? Why
Cal,
more attention is? Yeah.
was not the second biggest story of the day. Again, an embarrassment to me. For those who join us every day, you know how fond I am of Xiaomi phones. Lithuania is saying, throw away your fucking Chinese phone. Literally those words. Because we just found out that your Xiaomi and Huawei phones can be surveilled and likely are being surveilled by the Chinese. That's why they're asking you not to buy Chinese phones and to throw away the ones you have most expeditiously at your soonest convenience.
A little funny. I read an article this morning.
But Jeff, let me put a bow on that. Are we to assume that Zoom isn't doing the same? We kind of know. Well, let me put it this way. It turns out that when it comes to the topic that perhaps China is most sensitive to of all sensitive topics, the Tiananmen Square massacre, the one event that they're really going out of their way to take great efforts to erase that ever happened. That they, when people were using Zoom for that purpose, they jumped out of the closet to say, "Hey, whoa, hey, stop that! None of that." It's like, wait a minute, you weren't supposed to be hiding in that closet, and you couldn't, bring yourself to let that go on. It was that. You see what I'm saying? Like, they've been monitoring. Obviously, they're obviously monitoring Zoom, and they in revealing that they were shutting down accounts that were doing Tiananmen Square titled rooms, that they came in and shut those down. The cat's out of the bag. You just revealed you've been monitoring from China. What is there? And now the Xiaomi phones are, Lithuanian securities raising the red flags that the smartphones are as well, which, by the way, are miraculously way underpriced. Like, as if they're intelligence collecting tools. And TikTok as a platform in China last week, in the past 5 days, is now being limited to 40 minutes per day. And the content is being limited to uplifting content, and they're removing content that has a negative impact on society and yada, yada, yada. But the biggest viral video in America at the moment is the destruction of school bathrooms. And it was also revealed in recent days that the TikTok executives are responsible for and have a direct hand in choosing what goes viral on TikTok. Just saying. It's worth a little investigative journalism, is what I'm saying. Lakeisha?
Yeah. Remember a couple of weeks ago, there was a story about these super low priced smartphones that were coming out of India. I wonder whether the Indian government. I wonder whether the Indian government or influence or people within the business community, within the smartphone industry in India, may have been trying to get ahead of this, because it coincided with the timing of, the Chinese apps being expelled from the country, right? So I wonder whether more countries will have a more nationalistic approach to not only, which apps are able to operate within their, within their borders, but also the hardware that is marketed and sold.
Yeah, so Lakeisha from Vinay here, absolutely right on, because one of the things about getting rid of Chinese apps was the emergence of the Indian apps, Koo, and all of the equivalents of TikTok, etc. But on the hardware side, it's been a little bit more challenging to replace the made in China products. So there's been a big push. Modi's been pushing the made in India and really threw the weight in and supported and fast tracked approvals for even now any company that wants to make tech hardware in India. It's fast track approvals through the government like never ever before.
Wow.
And there's more. There's more. There's another headline today from Reuters. Reuters exclusive. Are you ready for this one? Reuters exclusive. Polish gene project moves to drop Chinese tech on data concerns. The European Union funded project to build a genetic genome map of Poland plans to drop gene sequencing technology from China's BGI group over concerns about data security. One of the project's leaders told Reuters the genomic map of Poland concerns stem from questions over how Polish genomic data may be used to relate to national security. Says the professor of the Institute of Bioorganic Chemistry at the Polish Academy of Sciences who steers the project. He said the concerns were initially raised by a report earlier this year from the U.S. National Security Commission on AI, which said that BGI may be serving as a global collection mechanism for Chinese government genetic databases. BGI told Reuters in response that the U.S. report was disinformation not borne out by the facts. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called it groundless accusation and smears. The spokesperson said it stood by its report and has recommended the United States and allies double down on techniques to better protect patient privacy. Since 2015, Beijing has restricted foreign researchers from accessing gene data on Chinese people. In August, a human genetics committee at the Polish Academy of Sciences said a lack of compliance by what it calls the Far East companies with the principles of genetic testing ethics raised serious doubts. It did not name any companies or countries, but urged labs and scientific institutions that sequence genetic material abroad to stop using biotechnology companies from there. It said about 100,000 complete Polish genomes may already be in quote-unquote Far Eastern laboratories, citing a rough estimate which Reuters could not verify. Poland has no control over the sensitive personal data, the committee said. The organizer of the group said that the genomic map, which is expected to cost over 100 million zlotys, which is about $25 million, is about halfway through its program of sequencing 5,000 Polish genomes and has outsourced the work to a third party since 2019. There was another really interesting quote in here. Oh, here it is. National security. Reuters reported in July that BGI, this Chinese genomic company, had developed an improved and prenatal screening test for pregnant mothers, a genomics test, sold in at least 52 countries in collaboration with the People's Liberation Army. The privacy policy on the test's website says data collected can be shared directly relevant to when it is directly relevant to national security or national defense security in China, although BGI says it hasn't been asked to do that. BGI uses the pregnant women's genetic data for research into the traits of populations. It also collaborates with the People's Liberation Army. But I love how the Polish folks refer to a lack of compliance by quote-unquote Far East companies and that their Polish genomes may already be in quote-unquote Far Eastern laboratories without naming a country. So they're scrapping their big $25 million plan of genetic sequencing polls because one of the teams that doing the sequencing was using a Chinese technology to do it because of their rather well-reported ties to building genetic databases for China. Which, by the way, I
tried to ping Charles and Tyler.
He was here when we read this one when he was here previously. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, good.
And there's a New York Times article that says China's building a genetic database of everybody. By the way, China's not alone. Charles has really interesting information because he's building a genetics startup himself about genetic databases. But governments want to build genetic databases. And China very specifically wants to build a genetic database, as the New York Times is reporting. So,
Yeah, and Tyler, I think
I'm
everyone would
curious
want
to
to. Sure, go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead.
curious to find out what companies NASA used, and having a conversation this weekend with one of the researchers and scientists, the school, the college, the institute that sent those twin brothers, the twin study done by NASA that collected a lot of genomic information. So I'll be asking him that question.
Yeah, that was the Kelly brothers. It was more the microbiome.
Okay.
Yeah, Tyler, what I was trying to say is that I think everyone would gradually want to use these genomics data. And what do we do about it? One solution could be like just 2 days back, Facebook AI research, they released their MPC, multi-party computation framework. It's a new framework, right, where people just can share their own data. They can build, it's sort of a federated learning, but not exactly federated learning. But people need not share exchange their data among themselves, and without even sharing those data, people can build highly advanced, sophisticated model using their framework. So it's quite a good progress in that direction, and maybe in future this is going to be the way, because it's not that if India wouldn't want to build something like that, or US wouldn't want to build something like that. We have to come up with a solution where people shouldn't be snatching each other's privacy.
Yeah, there are two companies that do that. Luna DNA, a bunch of Illumina expats who are doing it as a passion play in San Diego, and then Nebula Genomics out of Origins and George Church's lab out of Boston that are making exactly that play, and they've been around for a couple of years.
John, just look for Krypton. Krypton, it's the Facebook AI research new framework. You might like it.
So in a before we get on to the next article, there's one that a bunch of people are messaging in here, being widely reported in the recent hours that from CBS News and others. U.S. intelligence officer on trip with CIA chief had Havana syndrome symptoms. Intelligence officer traveling with CIA Director William Burns while in India this month reported symptoms consistent with Havana syndrome and sought immediate medical care, according to two people familiar with the matter. It is the second case known to have occurred during a senior U.S. official's travels overseas, and the latest of dozens of new incidents reported this year alone. Last month, Vice President Kamala Harris's trip to Vietnam was temporarily delayed after her delegation was told that at least one American official in Hanoi had suffered symptoms associated with the neurological illness that first emerged years ago among U.S. personnel in Cuba. The symptoms of Havana syndrome, or as its anomalous health incidents, as the Biden administration refers to them, include headaches, nausea, and vertigo. Some cases have resulted in a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury. More than 200 American officials, including 100 intelligence officers, have reported suspected cases thus far. It is unclear whether the officer who fell ill in India was targeted because of a link to the CIA director. Circumstances of the event are still being investigated. The incident was first reported by CNN. The U.S. intelligence community has not yet determined whether a foreign actor is to blame, according to previous statements issued by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. But some U.S. officials suspect the cases may be the result of attempted surveillance by foreign intelligence services using directed energy technologies to target officials' electronic devices. Of particular concern, current and former officials say, is that suspected instances of the illness have not abated, and they have even been proliferating globally. Some believe the proximity of recent incidents to current senior administration officials is an indication that the perpetrator may be growing more brazen in its choice of targets. A CIA spokesperson told CBS News that while the agency does not comment on specific cases or personnel, it has protocols in place for when individuals report possible anomalous health incidences that include receiving appropriate medical treatment. The agency under Burns has tripled the number of medical staff dedicated to the health incidents and reinvigorated a task force charged with investigating their cause. The intelligence community has also convened an expert panel that includes senior CIA officials, as well as an outside scientists and medical experts to investigate possible causes. It doesn't mention it in this article, but they've also been reporting cases in Austria and Berlin, or Vienna and Berlin. But now there's a new one in India, which is particularly weird because it's the most recent assumptions is that this is Chinese based, but I wonder how they were able to do that in India.
Those, my lead horse on this is still that this is some kind of microwave resonance cavity type weapon, whether or not it's related to, the Topanga Technologies lighting company I worked with or not. It's becoming kind of clear this is some kind of microwave lensing type system that is causing this injury. Again, that company, Topanga, its technology is currently being used in radio ablative brain surgery. So they're using RF to basically prevent mitosis and keep cancer cells from reproducing. So you can imagine that there's probably plausible effects, and John would probably be able to comment if what I'm saying is plausible or not. But I do know that RF does have effects on cellular reproduction, which may be, one thing to at least look at here.
It's focus, the lens focusing and distance, and uh, uh, the time curve of the dose. So yeah, all those things account for could explain both.
Yeah, and Tyler, to your point of how could the Chinese be in India? It's like they come in through Nepal all the time. A bunch of Chinese are often arrested trying to sneak in through Nepal into India and sent back into China. So it's
okay. So
I was listening peripherally, and I wanted to ask how closely can China be monitoring WeChat and be using WeChat's obviously text based to find out what was the thing that we were talking about yesterday? Being able to see whether someone has depression through text, and obviously that's just one use case, but there can be multiple use cases for that, right? So maybe they're just seeing everyone's text and being able to save and manage all of that data through that as well. So
yeah. But Chris, how likely is it that the intelligence community it shouldn't seem that difficult to connect the dots that you're suggesting of Topanga's technology being one of the potential. They must have examined that, no?
Yeah, I mean, if you really kind of want to know, it's likely that they have their own directed energy and are just, not trying to bring any attention to the fact that this is symmetrical warfare.
Okay, so the next story is Apple iPad Mini 2021 review. A15 chip, Pencil 2 support, better cameras, and a USB-C port, but no keyboard case support. And the screen feels too small for some apps. Solid performance and battery life. It has true tone screen, upgraded front camera, and reasonable price, but the design now feels boring, according to Gizmodo. So the next one, it was from Politico, and it's the one that I mentioned briefly 30 minutes ago about Facebook allegedly had a condition as part of its $5 billion settlement with the FTC regarding Cambridge Analytica, which as part of that settlement, the FTC would have to drop plans to sue and depose Mark Zuckerberg personally. So there's that headline from Politico today. Quite an interesting revelation. It's Facebook shareholders are now wanting to Facebook to be held account for kind of throwing Facebook shareholders under the bus by paying this $5 billion settlement just to keep Mark Zuckerberg's feet out of the fire. Yeah, that's Facebook paying to keep their boss out of trouble. So, but who knows?
Did you guys already talk about the like Operation Happy or whatever the hell it's called, where
Yes.
Facebook is now putting like happy news or positive statements
Yeah.
about Facebook in their ads?
Yep.
Did you guys see that?
Yeah, we did. It's called Operation Project Amplify. The effort.
Yeah, there you go.
The effort
Like happy
to
Facebook news.
yes, to show positive stories about Facebook on Facebook. Yeah, that's
What
actually.
positive stories have there been? I mean, like that must be like a really lean feed.
Real short show.
It's a good question.
Lean feed. I like that.
But that's the biggest story of the moment from the New York Times. That one.
The saddest part is the ad would probably run a decent amount, but the comments would probably get it shut down in a second.
So there's a new. I just hit refresh on my source of news articles, like with the hottest news stories. The biggest story at the moment is the live stream of Microsoft Surface event, which we have to wonder how to what degree they'll talk about vulnerabilities, because that could take up the whole show. The next one, the second biggest story now that people are waking up in the US and affecting the algorithms of what are the most popular stories, is from Axios that Facebook says Apple's AT&T changes will continue to cause headwinds in Q3 and reveals it underreported iOS web conversions by 15% on average, pushing Facebook stock down 3% so far today. Okay. And then we did the Apple iPad review. We did the Netflix games. And then this one, as it passes 2 billion iPhones sold, Apple has avoided disruption by adding useful features nobody asked for and avoiding overshooting on the performance that few need. Interesting point. Next one is...
Tyler, is it just me or is this sushi not that good?
the new iPhone, yeah. Dapper Labs, maker of NFT-focused NBA Top Shots, raises $250 million. Man, this is 2 days in a row that NFT companies have raised similar amounts. There was one yesterday, raised something like $330 million, an NFT-focused company for soccer. And here's an NFT company around NBA raising $250 million. Those are big, big, big rounds for...
Well, but that's like the ICO. I mean, I own about 25 NFTs, and I really expect most of them to amount to nothing. I was just playing with the technology and Discord and the way to do it, and I spent, I don't know, maybe 1 ETH on the whole experiment. But my issue is that some of them will have projects built on top of them, and some of them will not. They will raise the money and take it and run, because there's some places where NFTs will be more useful than others. Sports, I think, is one where they will be.
Mm-hmm.
For these two recent investment, the company seems like you'll probably attract a lot of gamblers, right? Is it potentially going to be used for gambling?
Some of them are, most of them,
No,
as far as I
trading.
understand, are actually they're like dynamic NFTs. So what they're doing is a couple of things. One is like the soccer stuff tends to be more along the lines of, who was it, like Messi who did this, or Ronaldo? I don't know. I get them confused. Well, one of them, whatever. I'm not a sports person for the most part. So one of them raised raise money, or the soccer one is what they're going to do is have it be a key, essentially, right? So the aspect that they're going to emphasize is if you own it, then you get to attend a certain number of games, you get the access to particular types of merch, you get there's all sorts of things like that. So it's basically an access pass. Other ones are doing them like sports, the future of them, which I'm still waiting to be built. We're doing a gaming discussion today at 10 a.m. Pacific on blockchain and gaming and sports and stuff like that. But one of the things that I'm hoping is going to happen is that NFTs are interactive, so you can actually draft a league based on tokens that have particular attributes of players. So, like, say you have, a player that has an attribute that's like, all like their lifetime average. Say it's baseball, right? Their lifetime average to date, if they're still playing, is the stats of that token. You build a team. You can have like, premium ones where you have like the 3 best years are the stats, and then you can have like, really cheap ones that are like the worst year are the stats. But anyway, so they can interact with each other. So you could draft a team that includes players from like the 20s and the 90s and today, and have it play another team, because that's what they can do. This is like, NFTs are not just cartoons. Like, they're a powerful asset. So just to say that there's like a lot that's going to be happening with this space, and most of it is not about just creating like a particular type of image. The other thing that's happening now are fine art. Provenance is now traveling on the blockchain, which, to be fair, that's one of the earliest use cases of it. You're going to have NFTs that are used for finance, because they're
Grants.
assets. They're not just like an image of something. Their ownership of it. So it's the difference between somebody taking a picture of my house and owning the deed to my house. They are very different things. They may look like the same thing, but they are not the same thing. So there's a lot that's happening. It's actually a really exciting area. But those rounds are particularly huge. Generally speaking, a big round in blockchain, particularly in the NFT space, is like a 10 million round is like a solid, really good round. So when you're talking 900 million in raises recently, that's enormous. And I think 19 billion to date so far. That's huge, 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 way out of the league of all the other things that have happened earlier this year. So
And that means they're here to stay. There's a lot of scamming going on. Alexander probably knows a lot more about that than I do. But for every person who takes the money from the raise and runs, there will be somebody who builds a game or a collection or a way of getting access, or like me, a fund of funds to support other creators.
I think one of the key things that looking at these NFTs when they're issued is what percent of the tokens are going to insiders. When you see such huge money being raised, oftentimes it's a very large percent. So the VCs are just basically getting licensed to print their own money.
Well, I wonder how does governments adopt the kind of legally, approving NFTs as an example you gave, Alexandra, as an NFT being the title deed to your house. A title deed is a recognized legal instrument, and but so they would
yeah,
need.
that's oh, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah, that's actually, so you still have to go through perfection. And if you have something that is like, for example, a deed, you could NFT property, say, like, or develop some other security token for it. So say you had a piece of land, and you wanted to develop it, and you wanted to develop it in a particular manner. So you didn't just want to sell it to a developer who did whatever. You want to have like certain, like, protected lands. You want to have mixed use. You want to have walkable. You want to have like a range of income, housing, etc. So, and you can't find a developer to do that all to your land. They're like, no, we'll buy it from you, and then we'll do stuff to it, and then we'll sell it, right? So you only get the amount that the developer would pay you. So what you could do now is take the land, NFT it. So you're basically selling portion rights to other people.
Yeah, I get that.
You take that
But
money, and instead of having to, like, say you wanted a loan, if you
I
wanted
know,
a loan, you'd
I
have to,
know,
oh,
I
sorry.
get that. So let's say we do that in Zimbabwe, and then the Zimbabwe government says that's poppycock. That means nothing.
You could do that, but for the most part, at least in the U.S., what ends up happening is you still have to take an additional step to complete legal perfection when it deals with real estate and things like that.
Right.
So you actually have to file something. But most deeds, at least, the U.S. is really what I know best in terms of that kind of stuff. But most deeds and things like that are actually digital. They're not well organized, but they're digital. And this is actually part of the process to close up holes in ownership. That's a big problem. Chain of title isn't secure in everywhere, right? So you have to know who the seller was and who the buyer was, and there can't be a gap in ownership. Or you have the potential of someone else actually having the legal rights to that property um, uh, over yours. Even if it happened like 100 years ago, there's a theoretical possibility that someone else has the right to your property, and you end up taking it either modified or in something called quitclaim, which is like as it is. You take it as it is. So the government wouldn't say, at least in the US, like that's not possible. They would say make sure that it complies with the requirements of registration. It's actually making it a stronger case for chain of title than currently exists, because it literally has every transaction. Even if it wasn't perfected, you would know who what transaction happened in the past to go search out what happened with something particular, which doesn't exist right now.
I'm just saying,
But it does. You bring up a good point.
How long before government? The point is that governments and courts make the decision about what is legal and acceptable as agreements or not, and how long before NFTs are understood and accepted as a new, more efficient way of doing fractional ownership of all kinds of things. In the same way that, today, if you want to make a company in America, you make a LLC. It's a document that you file with the state of Delaware, most typically as a tech company, or as an S corp or a C corp. These are all this is the current legal structures of things that the governments recognize, and DAOs aren't. So how long before, if we try to fit this technology to become compliant with governments? I mean, it was initially created to go above and beyond the compliances of governments, and that's where
it does. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, my point is because these technologies were built with the idea in mind of circumventing government policies, the idea of shoehorning them into actually become compliant with government policies to me the interesting process that's undergoing.
I don't think actually that so some of the very early technologies were built with the idea of circumventing government intervention. Everything after 2016, 17, all the stuff that's happening now, none of that is designed specifically to evade the government. It is just designed to make something possible or more accessible, but it's not designed to evade the government. Do they want to be regulated? Most of the time, no. Do they understand regulation that exists? Yes. This is mostly what I talk about. But in terms of when is it going to be accepted by the governments, my crystal ball sucks. I really wish it were not broken. In terms of, is this designed to, is this going to be something that is supposed to circumvent? No, a lot of blockchain is actually done to assist government transactions. Estonia is fully blockchained up. They are light years ahead of us because all the great Russian coders moved over to Estonia because their businesses were being basically like eminent domained, whatever the Russian form is of that, and so they wanted to build businesses somewhere else, and so they went to Estonia. And Estonia is like, you can vote on blockchain, you can get your driver's license, you can do all your government paperwork, all of it, all of your identity stuff is handled on blockchain. It's secured and
EHR.
it's confidential, right? Because the premise of blockchain, generally speaking, so there's other ways to do it, but typically most blockchains are built on the premise of transparent transactions but anonymous parties. And that is that's a very strong case for things like voting and doing other government things. Like, this is like, the government can design a blockchain. There are governments that are working on designing blockchains for particular things. It's the technology is not evil. Some people are not using it, to the best benefit of humanity, but it's just another technology.
Tyler, I just DM you an article. The gambling industry is starting to seriously look at NFTs.
Yes, and the next biggest article.
Could I just add? Could I add one sentence here?
Sure.
First of all, regarding Estonia, it's a bit of a oxymoron because it is far ahead, but it's also very bureaucratic. But in terms of when NFTs might be integrated into a legal system for property ownership, I mean, the state of Wyoming in the United States has already taken the step of passing a DAO supplement, which will legalize a DAO. And I would expect Texas or Wyoming would be one of the first states to do something similar with NFTs.
So the next,
I mean,
what I'm
DAOs,
doing.
but just as a quick word is that DAOs and NFTs or DAOs in any particular offering, DAO is like an LLC, right? Like DAO, I mean, doesn't have that kind of protection, but you think of it as just a structure. They're not endemic to any particular type of offering or application on blockchain, right? So some are not even decentralized. You know, there's something called the trilemma, and you basically get 2 out of 3 things usually in your solution. It can either be, so it's like decentralization, security, and scalability, which is usually related to speed. And usually you solve that in different ways for different problems. So a DAO is a structure for something that maximizes decentralization, but that could be anything. That could be, you know, something related to NFTs. It could be DeFi. It could be identity. It could be anything. So, so they're just separate things. They don't go together all the time.
And it's really interesting. Somebody mentioned Wyoming because the entire legislature and
I'm sorry to
governor.
interrupt, guys. There's some breaking news.
Go ahead, Vinay.
Just tweeted it to you, Tyler. I got this from Taiwan has just applied for the Pan-Pacific Trade Pact right after China. So China's made a formal application to join the Trade Pact.
CPTPP?
Yeah,
yes.
with Taiwan and
What
Australia.
Does that mean? What is that? What does that mean?
There's a trade agreement, just like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is the one most Americans are familiar with, and then NAFTA 2. There's these countries have trade agreements where they kind of form blocks that they allow free trade between each other. And there's one that Vinay is referring to, which is called the CPTPP, which is largely Asian in nature. And this Asian one, which includes Australia and Japan and Thailand, I believe, and a few others, China applied yesterday, and the members are, now a bit perturbed about what to think of that. And then now Taiwan has just applied. So that's the headline right now from Reuters. Taiwan applies to join the Pacific Trade Pact just after China. Taiwan has formally applied to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP, the government said on Wednesday, less than a week after China said it too had submitted an application. Taiwan has been angling to join the grouping for a while and had already been discussing the issue informally with the bloc's existing members. Cabinet spokesperson Lo Ping-chen said they had informed the CPTPP's members of their decision to apply to seek their support, and that Premier Su Sang-cheng had asked ministries to make preparations for talks. Applying to join CPTPP is an important economic and trade policy that the government has worked hard to promote for a long time. And more details will be given on Thursday following a weekly cabinet meeting. Taiwan economic minister last week expressed concern about China's sudden decision to apply to join and said she hoped it did not affect the island's own application. The original 12-member agreement, known as the TPP, was seen as an important economic counterweight to China's growing influence. But the TPP was thrown into limbo in early 2017 when then U.S. President Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the group. The grouping, which was renamed CPTPP when America left, currently links Canada, Australia, Brunei, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Britain is also keen to join, and Taiwan is excluded, and this is the important part. Taiwan is excluded from many international bodies because of China's insistence that Taiwan's part of China. And so the fact that Taiwan's even applying, if those states accept Taiwan, they're kind of recognizing Taiwan as being independent from China. So now you understand why this is such a political hot button issue. But
China's going to try to pressure everyone to play their side.
Taiwan has been heartened by recent progress towards trade agreements with the United States and the European Union, which are both frustrated with China's lack of progress in opening its economy and are keen to show their support for Taiwan's democracy and much freer market policies. End of article. Thank you, Vinay, for that one.
I know that Joe Biden at the UN, he just gave a speech, which unfortunately I only read parts of, but I think he's talking about he doesn't want a Cold War with China. Well, he didn't say China, but he says he doesn't want a Cold War with any, large economic groups. That's China. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what preceded that or what that was in recognition of, but I guess he's trying to be conciliatory. I'm not sure, but I'm surprised that Chile is a part of it just because they tend to do so much with the Southern Cone. Like that's actually, there's a trade agreement, just OAS, the Organization of American States. That's actually where a lot of the peacekeeping and solutions finding for inter-Latin conflict makes its way. Like that actually is super powerful, but nobody hears about it because America is not really involved in it. And that's why these other countries are involved in it. But I'm very surprised that they would join this Pacific group. I don't know if they're precluded or not. They must not be, but it just doesn't sound like something typically that they do, which is join outside of the strong South American community.
Okay, so the next big article here is teachers say many students brought up with search features on their phones and computers are unfamiliar with directories and folders, forcing a rethink of kind of everything. That's true. When you have a search bar, how many people using a laptop hit Command Space Bar and just search for whatever file or folder they're looking for, rather than going through the directory system of nested folders. It's a really interesting point. And Google searches have kind of trained us to just kind of search for what we're searching for, including in Gmail, using the search bar to search for an email rather than forcing all of your emails into folders. I thank God I never got into that game myself. Search bars work rather well. So it's an interesting point how usership is evolving beyond folders and files and directories. So the next one, Washington Post, is actually back to this point of legal recognition, official state sanctioning of technologies, where the SEC's Gary Gensler says stablecoins are a risk to consumers and equates the crypto boom to wildcat banking of the 1830s. The top Wall Street regulator described the digital assets frequently pegged to the US dollar as a danger to consumers. The next one from CNBC, they say they have sources ahead of its New York Stock Exchange debut. A company called Toast prices its IPO at $40 per share. And just another tech IPO.
Hey, Tyler, could we ask Donna or anyone else in the room that really knows the space better than I do, is the statement that stablecoins are a threat to consumers a shot across the bow saying we're going to introduce a central bank stable currency that will invalidate these early ones? Is that what he's
question.
saying?
Great question. That's a great question. Yeah, maybe similar to China not wanting Bitcoin because they have their own plans. Maybe the U.S. has a plan that he's not able to really discuss yet, but he preemptively.
But targeting stablecoins specifically, that's signaling something.
Yeah, they have been. The Fed has been on this for a little while. It's because stable coins are where an actual currency will come from, right? It's not Bitcoin. It's a stable coin because currencies need to maintain a constant value within a very narrow band. That's not what volatile assets like Bitcoin do, right? That's not a currency. But they've been after stable coins for exactly this reason. And the fortunate thing that they have right now is that stable coins are all designed terribly. So they just don't understand historically why these things break. So they keep designing the things that have already broken. The China, first of all, yesterday, I think I tweeted it out to you, Tyler, is that the yesterday, that China now says that Bitcoin is the first best successful application of blockchain, and this is because they did their pilot of their CBDC, and they're going to start rolling it out in a larger capacity now. So now they want everyone to jump on board with crypto, even though CBDCs are not cryptocurrency. They are digital dollars or digital currency. They are not cryptocurrency. So this is what I mentioned like a couple of months ago when they were kicking out all the miners, and then they kicked out all the exchanges and things like that. And I said all they're doing is just trying to build up their appetite for more crypto. So when they roll out their CBDC, that's, everybody's going to be really excited to snap that up, thinking it's also a cryptocurrency when it's not. So they're actually programmable money. So they can actually stop you from purchasing things and then monitor whatever you do purchase minutely. So that's why they're much worse than cash, in my opinion. But stable coins
Alexandra,
still have a use in.
can I
Sorry.
understand that? I'm just trying to understand it. You went quite quickly there. So your hypothesis or your thesis there is that people are now craving for more crypto because they can't get Bitcoin or they can't get so when they launch when they get more, I guess when they roll out their own currency, the digital yuan, people will want it because it's like the hunger for crypto. Is that the point? Just trying to
That's
fit the
certainly
demand for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it, is that they do create latent demand, and that is shown to exist, right? When you know something is happening, especially when you see that it is making someone profitable, or it makes you happier or thinner or less lonely or richer, right? All of those things, that creates this built up demand for the thing that seemed to generate that positive, happy thing. So it's not like China has been forbidding news of crypto growing, and the returns and stuff that are happening on it. What they're not doing is allowing anybody access to it unless and until their CBDC, their digital programmable money is available. And what they want is for people to use the yuan, which is their CBDC, instead of any other money, because then the amount of information and control that China has is much stronger. And you see other countries also developing their CBDCs. The US has one that's very close to completion. And it was designed initially only to combat the yuan, so that the yuan didn't dominate the global economy instead of the dollar. But the US has found out, obviously, that there's also other benefits to having this, which is being able to track any transaction that happens, unlike cash, right? There is zero anonymity when you have programmable money. And you can see them equating things to stable coins. Part of that is because they don't like stable coins, because they do actually deny a purpose. I had a whole discussion on this, but they deny a purpose of the government, right? They take away the government's need to mint currency, and that's actually the source of most of its power. So making currency outside of a government is something that governments tend not to like. But the other thing that that they want to do when talking about stable coins over and over is stable coins are a known cryptocurrency. So they're trying to equate the two. They're not equal.
Kathy Woods,
Tyler, yeah.
if I could get a quick word in, Kathy Woods of ARK Invest made the point that she's hearing from U.S. banks that they're lobbying the SEC and very, very concerned with falling deposits, because people are putting their money into stable coins where they can earn an interest, or into other cryptos where they can earn interest. So the SEC is being lobbied hard by the U.S. banks.
Well, and then you see also the attack on DeFi, because stable coins are one of the two main tools of DeFi. And you don't actually earn interest on stable coins, but they're a tool for DeFi where you do earn interest. And the reason that it's so powerful is because most people don't have access to financial tools through traditional banking, right? You have to have like $10,000 in 6 months without touching it in order to be able to make a 4% return in a CD in the bank. Otherwise, you get a 0 or 1% interest rate account. So for people to make any money on their money, which is the most stable way and most consistent way and safest way to build generational wealth, you have to already have some amount of wealth. So it basically just hardens the divide between the rich and the poor. DeFi, you need like $5 you can get in. So
Yeah, could I ask you a question about the implications for that? Do you see evidence already that China is aggressively trying to take cash out of circulation? And if so, when would you predict that the last cash representation of money will exist in China?
personally,
I
I don't
mean,
know.
wasn't the
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if they're trying to actively remove it. I know that they'll just declare that the yuan is the currency, and then whether they'll buy up currency or just transfer balances and then say burn your paper ones. I don't know what their method of doing that is. I know that it's going to be ugly when it happens, but I know it's coming because that's their desire. So I'm sure paper will be accepted for a little while, especially in like smaller regions and stores. But it'll all convert over, like just like what happened, with everybody started using ATMs and things like that and didn't actually, or I'm sorry, everybody started using credit cards, and cash became much less prevalent. So it may phase out, but the way that China does stuff, and many other people are more qualified to speak to the Chinese policy than I am, but that they do tend to do things by fiat. So I would imagine they just say like, trade all your stuff in for the yuan by X date, and then nobody should accept the traditional yuan.
That's exactly what I was expecting, and I wonder if that announcement of that end date for redemption of cash for digital currency is going to occur within the next 6 to 12 months.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll give you a little.
a lot
There's
of people in Asia
oh,
uses a stable coin to avoid currency fluctuation. So a lot of people here in Asia and many other countries, they do not keep their original currency. They do a lot of tethering there just to avoid the currency fluctuation. What happens as a result of it? Let's say there was no stable coin. A lot of people would be buying a lot of people would be doing those currency trades, which they are not doing now. So let's say, for example, one person in say India who needs to have, let's say, $10,000 of USD, he need not actually go the over the counter and register that trade. You can just buy a stable coin and keep it as long as it's at least USDC is private. So what governments are seeing also is that uh, even if the US trade, a lot of currency trade is happening, but it's not resulting in actually USD going up in rate because that exchange hasn't happened over proper counter. So if you look at a market of currency market, those prices of USD remains the same, but a lot of money has flown into USDC or Tether by that much. So that could be a problem, and that actually is quite an area of opportunity. And why not China should also do it officially? So imagine they are building a Tether or a USDC, but with all government supervision. I think that's basically a very lucrative way to attract foreign capital.
Sean, to answer your question, John, it's expected that they will that the China perceives the Olympics as an opportunity to promote their currency, which happens in February.
So on this note, and maybe Pauline, I know Pauline's here. She has more insight on China. Early in the COVID crisis, there were rumors that they were destroying currency because they thought that it was spreading via currency. Does anybody on stage or anywhere know? Has anyone heard that
No,
or saw
in
insight
China,
on that?
they mostly use WeChat Pay and Alipay. They don't touch paper money these days, but for many years already.
So the
on Reddit, it
I think
was
the rumor
rumored
is
that
not.
they were
Yeah,
burning
it's probably just
cash.
rumor. No, they have not been using cash, Chris. They have been using WeChat Pay and Alipay. They don't even need to touch cash. So
Right, but
that rumor is probably not valid.
I think we may be on the cusp of a tipping point where if they actually announce a deadline at which you can no longer redeem, the cash under your mattress for digital currency, that the advantages of that in terms of the state management of currency in the economy will cause a cascade across other countries and other national digital currencies. It just seems like that's kind of an inevitable kind of scenario, and I'd love to know, Alexandra, if that conforms to your thinking.
Um, yeah, I mean, so you already see countries that are doing this, and just to Cheryl's point, so they're using electronic payment systems already, but they're using electronic payment systems in the yuan. So there's nothing that the government can do unless they take over Alipay or WeChat to dig in, and maybe they have, I don't know, but to dig in to get information about what transaction happened or to stop it from happening, right? You can still use AliChat and or Alipay and WeChat, but you use it as, but you use a e-yuan as the transfer instead of your regular yuan. So literally the government is in the middle of the transaction. The form of payment like Alipay or whatever, or Alipay or whatever that you're using, is not as important as the fact that it's this type of money that's changing hands, right? So, do I think that this is going to happen more in the future? I mean, absolutely. It's for in government's interest, depending on especially it depends on the type of government, right? But here's the problem: is if you have a government like ours, for example, which is putatively actually democratic, right? But you have a government that doesn't have any interest in putting in the programmable parts of this, right? So the e-dollar is going to look very different from the e-yuan, but the underlying technology is the same. So if we get another administration in that decides, you know what, surveillance is good, I think we should just turn these things on, they don't have to know, like it takes no other effort to actually to convert the e-dollar or the e-yuan to like surveillance mode. It's just part of the technology. It becomes a risk all the way across the board. Now, are people going to start getting rid of paper money? I don't know. I think what's probably going to end up happening is more transactions in stable coins, right? Because paper money, as it becomes more rare, is going to be more noticeable for people who have a crap ton of it, right? So if you want to do like black market or like, the morally questionable businesses, they're not illegal, but banks don't want to deal with them, and you have a ton of cash because you're dealing with something that either isn't suitable or the people who are involved in it don't necessarily want to be tracked. That becomes a huge standout. Like you're not just another cash carrying person in the public, you're like the only cash carrying person in the public. So I imagine what's going to happen is all of those businesses that are either gray or black market will start working entirely in stable coins or other types of currency that are not at all part of the government. So, I mean, I think one of the things you're going to see is, like, on one hand, you're going to see a bunch of people ending up more in these in the CBDCs, but at the same time, all those countries that have a tendency to create black market industries and gray market industries because of the incredible government control of capital, all they're going to do is move farther outside the fiat system, which is just move into stable coins.
Just to chime in regarding, I guess, payment in China, they probably use, I guess, digital transactions more than we do in North America. On WeChat, they even added a function for in Chinese New Year, we usually give red packets, which is traditionally cash. People are sending red packets digitally. They aren't even handing it, I guess, in cash anymore. I would anticipate that if this was true in any form, it might be in like poorer areas, but even small kiosks prefer digital payments since a couple of years, like since I've been there. And if anything, if they are trying to remove cash, it would more likely be to try to track what everyone's doing rather than coronavirus, really.
I mean, I would just be concerned because do you guys remember what happened in India when they decided to remove like the two most valuable currencies because people were paying for houses and stuff in cash, and I guess they weren't being tracked. And that was a mess. I mean, they said, okay, you have to turn in your notes and we'll give you lower note value or whatever it is. And that is like, that was just two notes. That wasn't all the notes, right? That was just two notes. So, I mean, I'm concerned that this is going to be a terrific mess in many countries. I don't know how you would do that in an organized fashion.
I
And
was actually in Uttar Pradesh when that happened, and it was catastrophic. The first 4 or 5 days actually were just a complete chaos. If you can imagine people leaving their jobs, like taking their motorbikes to 5 towns over to find an ATM line with 100 people, and I mean it was insanity. And I think it took many months after the first announcement. It was just incredibly poorly executed by the government. But to imagine that something similar happening in China, Cheryl, the only way I'll push back on what you said earlier about everyone using, WeChat Pay and Alipay. I mean, I don't find that to be true actually in most of the parts of China where I work. If you get out of the major urban hubs, it's a lot of cash. So I don't know how that can happen on a dime. And I say that no pun intended.
one last thing. I don't think we've heard much about how this would affect the U.S. currency, meaning us going digital, because, those that aren't aware, North Korea's number one, means of attacking us is actually through what they call a super note. It's a very, very accurate reproduction of the US $100 bill. And they use it to basically mess with our economy and mess with our economic system because they know how widely promulgated the US dollar is everywhere in the world. These super notes don't just go to the United States, they go into other people's, pillowcases around the world. And so, this is interesting because that's going to pull that part out of the currency game if we go digital.
That's really funny. I know that that's bad and everything, but that's really funny.
But one thing we have to take note is whichever country's government do something, they think about their people first. I don't think they have the energy to think about other people first. So they'll first focus on their own people. They do it for their people, then they'll think other things. So don't be too sensitive, Chris.
Okay. Next one is.
I think Donna wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Donna.
Just 1 second. Yeah.
No, I just was going to respond about the U.S. and our attempt at a CBDC.
Yeah.
If that's appropriate now.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, we're still waiting for a white paper from the Fed. It was going to come in the summer. It's now supposedly coming in the fall. I don't know exactly when that is. So we're quite a way off. But as we've heard our chairman at the SEC talk the other day and many other days, and in writing, he's now changed the terminology a little to stable value coins. And those will definitely come under a regulatory framework, whether they be SEC or Treasury, depending upon how the stablecoin is constituted. So we're moving quickly in that direction. So that will impact, perhaps the quickness by which the CBDC in the U.S. comes out, but we're entering a regulatory framework to be able to allow that as well as keep control of the monetary policies.
So just before you joined, we were asking the question about whether the Treasury statement that we should be wary as consumers of stablecoins in the U.S. is that signaling the fact that they don't want to incur more headwinds to a national fiat digital currency?
I think it's signaling that they've been concerned with the amount, the quick rise in the stablecoin, whether it be Circle's stablecoin or Tether, and the fact that the latter is backed to a large extent by we don't know what kind of commercial paper, Now, Circle has indicated that it is moving to a USD and Treasury only backing and will therefore not, most probably, I can't say definitively, but not most probably not be classified as a security, and that it would like to be registered as a digital bank. Not exactly sure what that is. It might be something similar to what Anchorage is or Kraken, but I don't think it'll move. The Fed is moving at the deliberate pace that it is, whether it be too slow or too fast to some people's perspectives, but they will consider other elements to the composition of a CBDC that are not in the Chinese one, for example, privacy, and to what extent they work within the banking system to deliver these CBDCs and wallets, as opposed to the Fed being responsible for all the tech. I don't know if that particularly answers your question, John.
Yes, thank you.
So a Mexican used car website raises $700 million. And a French used fashion website raises $209 million. Yeah. Is anyone getting the idea that used goods are going to start, websites are going to start making some money? I think they are. And I think that we're going to start seeing a ton of that. Tons and tons and tons of that. And it used to be eBay. And now you notice that the cars, eBay, which sold used everything, is now going to split up into apps for everything. So you're going to have this used car website in Mexico for raising 700 at an 8.7 billion valuation, and a French used fashion marketplace raising 209 million at a 1.7 billion valuation by SoftBank. So you're going to have fashion and cars and every used thing you can think of creating unicorns in every country you can think of, including India. My goodness, we could go do an Indian used car, used fashion, use this, use that. And I think because of that, because of the appification, and people are going to become more sensitive to, I think the next step, it's been a long ways in getting here, but we're finally getting close to, with identity verification coming online now for the first time ever, really, in a really simple way for a very small 2-person startup to be able to do identity verification and delivery in less than 30 minutes. We could now see real neighborhood lending of drones and cameras and office equipment and supplies for taking care of your house and your garden and your vacuum cleaner. Why buy a vacuum cleaner? Why buy a hedge trimmer, or even a basketball, or a backyard inflatable swimming pool, or swimming fins, when your neighbors will lend it to you on an hourly basis or daily basis for a 20th for 5% of the cost of buying it? And
there's another interesting trend that you can see from this, I think, because comparatively to what it used to be 10 years ago, when you needed an Amazon, right, or like you need an eBay for everything, people have learned to use multiple apps for very particular things. Mm-hmm. And initially you would think, oh, you can only use one text message app or, one streaming app. And now we see that there's a distribution of like attention and money that people are willing to pay to different things. And very interesting that you can today have a vintage store only for clothing, a vintage store only for shoes, and that all of those businesses will pop up and will still raise money and will still cater to a very particular audience and a particular service or product in the future. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, another interesting element of it, though, is when people want things, they often want them as quickly as possible. For example, I want a backyard swimming pool for the weekend, or a basketball for an hour from now. And that means I'm not likely gonna order it from online. But if this because of autonomous vehicle delivery systems with identity verification to eliminate fraud, and reputation systems, this neighborhood, local, near you supply chain of pretty much everything you could ever want is owned
Tyler,
by
there's
somebody
an
in your neighborhood.
app called Nextdoor.
Yeah.
One of my friend invested in it, and he was
Yeah.
just saying that it's just going IPO. I think
Yeah.
platform. It's about exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's
Yeah,
Fat
and I mean,
Llama in London just raised a bunch of money for it.
yeah, you're basically solving for the two main important things, right? Which is delivery and distribution. So, sorry, discovery and distribution, and through delivery. And so people discover that they want something, and then you can deliver it super fast to them.
Well, it's more
And
than that.
I think
Because
it's not even.
I think post pandemic, there's a whole bunch of people trying to figure out how they're going to make additional income and save money, and this addresses both of those. You don't need to buy nearly as much stuff, and you can make money from the stuff that you already own. So it solves a whole lot of
Yeah,
problems,
but
and not to mention
that.
the green element of stopping the consumer culture of endlessly producing everything. So
Yeah.
It's
But a
interesting
lot
to
has
think about it.
changed in like how people used to perceive, ownership versus
right,
use, right? Well, versus the
how
the
many
utility of.
lawnmowers does a community need? Why does every house need its own lawnmower? It's totally absurd,
Yeah,
John.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting to think about this from the lens of perishability of demand and perishability of supply, and allocation of goods based upon partial ownership and partial use, and I think it's going to reshape everything
Digital
Yeah,
kibitz.
to rationalize supply
Okay.
and
yeah.
demand in local
But a big
economies.
part of it is only possible now due to the internet, right? Like, and due to
Yes.
the connectivity of people and the community, or
Correct.
actually social media, which is both terrible and great at the same time, because Facebook groups allow for, let's say, my neighbors, like in our building, to share everything that we need. But it wasn't possible prior to, almost impossible prior to Facebook, or actually widespread internet broadband, because it was so expensive to like text everybody, and now it's free of charge basically. So a lot had to happen for it to really become possible
Yes.
Well, how will
Prerequisites.
today.
people differentiate status? Like, so they like to, so how will they, so everyone's going to share stuff with each other in a neighborhood. And currently people buy stuff they don't need, right? And it's a status thing, maybe a different branded car, and they want to be better than their neighbor. There's a psychology there. How does that, is it, we're going to differentiate by the things we think, differentiate by the things we achieve, the things we care about. To John's point, it is one side of it is the tools are there, the technology will be there for us to do that, but there's this human psychology where we're buying stuff that differentiates us. That in some ways, some neighbors do, and I'm
I
sure
think.
everyone here is doing that in some form.
I mean, I think that that's just endemic to a few cultures. I think there are many cultures that are much more collectivist than that and don't necessarily seek to stand out, particularly through possession. So, it's a unique characteristic, particularly of the U.S., but lots and lots of
which
other
which
cultures
is
don't
which
live
is the
here.
most powerful economy in the world, and it's also, as an Indian, I know that people differentiate themselves by the amount of gold that they have, by what they wear,
Yeah.
the clothes they wear. I don't see my father giving my daughter a secondhand sari when she gets married. I just don't psychologically see that today.
Yeah, but
But how does that work?
I think it
But
might
the
though.
next generation, I think, Kyle, has a totally different way of evaluating
Right.
self-worth, which is through social media and the perception of them owning a jet when they are renting a jet for an hour for the photo shoot. Because the way they claim to have self-worth is by getting likes and getting comments and getting clout on the internet. So I think this really lends itself well to this sharing economy, because we can all share the jet and seem like we all own it, because on social media there's no way to verify it.
I think it's
So
evolving though, because even in the U.S., I think there's a new focus on. I see this in my unicorn founder friends who are becoming much fitter and healthier. Like, look at Jeff Bezos, who looks absolutely ripped now. Looks like he hits the gym every day, right? He's got biceps, triceps. He's got legs, right? Have you noticed this lately? Google
Elon Musk has hair.
Elon's, yeah. Elon could make some progress in this department, but Zuckerberg and Bezos, historically going back, looking younger, they were very not the figures of health.
Tyler, they're going through their midlife crisis right now.
I know, but
I'm just being very honest.
here's my
It's
point.
an interesting point for a man.
Yes, my point is that I see this with Daniel from Spotify because we've hit the gym together. Like and he's getting fitter now, and this idea that if real wealth implies you have a lot of free time, that kind of early retirement, retiring at 30, I think is going to be the new status symbol between the haves and the have-nots. Who doesn't even need to work at all? Who has everything that they need in terms of, like kind of like an early freedom. I think time. You're optimizing for autonomy and freedom is going to become the new value. Who has everything that they need kind of at their disposal and don't need to
but
join
definitely
the.
not retirement. I mean, I don't
No,
see
not
any
retirement,
entrepreneur
but
retiring in the sense that our
exiting the rat
parents did.
race. I think is a different,
Yeah, and
similar but different context.
and when
Financial freedom.
time becomes the preeminent premium,
Right.
it's going to be very interesting because if I own something small that I only use 5 times a year, um, and I have the option of borrowing it 5 times a year from next door or on social media from a neighbor, the transactional time cost of borrowing and returning 5 times a year may push someone who's more time sensitive into ownership rather than the sharing economy.
Sure.
And so there's going to be an economic strata of people's premium on time versus money versus carbon footprint versus perishability. I mean,
Right.
there's all these factors that are going to converge and reshape the economy.
Well,
I
I
would.
always say this, that there are three currencies you have in life, right? There's monetary currency, there's time, and there's your health and energy. And I think the sooner you figure out that health and energy and time are very limited versus money that you can, well, it's not a zero-sum game. You can print more money, right? You can you can mint more Bitcoin, whatever. But in the end of the day, I think what they're trying to, like, what you realize very early on, I mean, like, as soon as you get a certain amount of money, you realize that money doesn't really help you much, because you only have, like, your body is your vehicle, and if your body is fucked, you're dead, because we haven't figured out anything better than protecting our physical body to carry your mind. And then what you want to do is you want to buy yourself, to Tyler's point, as much time as you can, because in the end of the day, all you remember from your life that you've had and the people you surrounded yourself with. And, like, as woo as it sounds, but really, like, in the end of the day, that's what you realize. And those who are lucky and can get a lot of free time and spend it on preserving the body, then they get to spend the money. But otherwise, this whole equation is very complex to figure out when you don't have the money, because then you have to spend your time and energy to get the money first. So it's kind of like this constant balance in between those three of those. So
And it's really fascinating because Kai-Fu Lee on Sunday, about the only personal reveal he did, was he said that in the last year, paying attention, and he didn't drop Ray Kurzweil's name, but Ray Kurzweil is kind of the pioneer of life extension with data analytics. um, that he had he had reduced his biologic age by 6 years in the past 1 year. And so it's really fascinating, the trade-offs you describe, and how people with access to information and resources are modifying their behavior based upon extending the time they spend in this life.
yeah, I mean, David Sinclair, right, in his work, I think Tyler mentions him a lot, and he's great.
Exactly.
He's a great one to follow and learn, and
I
also
agree.
Huberman and all of their, like, life hacks.
So
I've
what
been
would one
reversing
do with
my
that extra?
biological clock
Yeah,
for
but
the past
what
10
would one do
years.
with that extra time? I think
And I would
people
add,
want.
I would add social currency to the three currencies that were mentioned earlier. I think social currency is the pleasure you get out of your social network is another competing uh, aspect of currency.
I don't know
Sorry.
if someone mentioned this, but wasn't there a headline like a couple days ago about Zuckerberg and Bezos specifically wanting to hack the aging process or something like that?
They're big
And
investors in a
yeah,
new longevity project. Yeah,
Theorem
Aaron,
and Cami, I think you're trying to get
Kemi.
in. Yeah.
oh yeah, I think Aaron was talked over, so I just want to make sure she had a chance to be
Mm-hmm.
heard.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Cami. Yeah, that's based on the research I've been doing for the past 10 years. We're seeing the biological clock, and it's totally possible, workable. And the new clock that is out um, can exactly measure within the error margin of 3% the reversal of the chronological and biological aging.
20 years ago, there was a couple of really famous doctors that established or created something called real age, which is kind of, I guess it's the earliest time that I remember doctors kind of trying to get to kind of differentiating the age of your, from your birth date relative to your health. And then the quantified self market, which was all this digital health thing, really catalyzed a lot of this. I mean, I've been calling this stuff the calculus of life, because as you go through life, all of your choices start to unfold in your health, in your stock portfolio or your finances and things like that. But as these new apps start to make it easy with their dashboards and little gamification to flesh out more of how you're living your life, it's going to help you really examine the culture that you're expressing as you live your life. So the conspicuous consumption, Cal, man, totally. I remember drinking that stuff mad time in the 80s, right? And it's still, we've exported it. The U.S. has fully exported that. In the Indian culture, the Latin cultures, there's still a lot of cultures that really embrace the conspicuous consumption, that buying a brand really has something to do with who you are and what your worth is. And there's a certain number of people that believe that. But with the great divide economically with people, in terms of those that have and the have-nots, I think it is pretty evident that the have-nots, they're not buying into all that stuff, right? They're living a little bit more wisely, and so this share stuff is going to be lots of unicorns. I mean, they're going to have to come up with a whole new. The way I've been kind of speaking to this with regards to this, the demise of the climate, we're going to have to come up with a whole new mythical animal, because they're going to be way more successful than just unicorns in terms of how big of a market opportunity they represent. I'm Dave. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
I mean, I think ultimately Tyler's point of, the difference that you'll be able to see between the wealthy and the poor is basically, health and, you're physically fit, you're rested, and you can think and discuss things like, am I maximizing my social benefit? Am I, doing everything I can for the footprint? I mean, for people who are just trying to hopefully make rent, all of that is way beyond even this, like, what they can consider. Like, nothing that they have is worth more than getting money, because money is the thing that is enabling that, and it enables everyone to live just like freeing ourselves from hunting and gathering, right, gave us a huge amount of innovation, because our mental space was freed from constantly just sleeping, waking, hunting, sleeping, waking. Like, that's all we were doing, right? Once we were able to become agrarian, we were able to get caloric resources whenever we wanted. We were able to start innovating in society and creating things like laws and stuff like that. All of that happened because we were free of a certain amount of survival function. But there are still a ton of people who are living at this survival level. All they're doing is eating, sleeping, working, eating, sleeping, working. And so they're not going to be able to consider whether or not they're living their best life or anything like that, until they have a little more freedom from what, most, like many of us were, escaped from a while ago, right? Depending on how successful your family was and how wise you were in choosing your parents. But I mean, I think that there's going to be a huge divide between the healthy and the unhealthy. And if assuming our the US's medical structure doesn't change, I think that's going to have an enormous impact. We're going to see differentials in life expectancy, like 15-20 year differentials at least, because of access to healthcare and the ability to maintain health. It's just going to be very different.
I think we're seeing it in diet as well, like people's the whole Whole Foods organic ability is outside of the reach of a lot of people, and it's a real economic privilege to be able to be so concerned about one's diet.
Yeah, and on the other hand, really, what they're doing, a lot of the wealthy people are just fasting, so are actually not eating.
Yes,
to
exactly right.
preserve
Yeah.
Right. I was going to say the
And,
longevity stuff isn't from our health system. I mean, there's
right.
healthcare, which isn't great, but to your point, it's that those enhanced practices that again they're going to come down the economic lines just because people are interested in this stuff. But yeah, fasting supplements, practices, ability to get quality sleep, exercise, as you said, etc.
Yeah, Blue Zones, the book Blue Zones, really called this out 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
That it's not drugs and hospitals and doctors that make us live long, healthy lives. And that the most recent book on this, The Science and Technology of Growing Young, ironically by Sergey Young, is sort of an update on all of the things we can do to extend our lifespan and our health span, and almost none of it has to do with doctors, hospitals, or drugs.
I agree, and a lot of these daily lifestyle measures are free, and the food related choices are totally doable. Just the change in mindset is needed.
What's
Yeah,
really
one of the
interesting. Oh, sorry.
I was
What's
gonna
really
say, sorry,
Go Cami first. Go let Cami go first.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see who was speaking. Thank you. What's really interesting is to watch the field on longevity. And a lot of very successful entrepreneurs are investing in this space. And as technology is converging, specifically genomic editing, the increased sophistication of applying machine learning towards life sciences and synthetic biology, those three things you're going to see potentially next 5-10 years a plethora of de novo diagnostics, biosensors, and of course, we already have the mechanisms for the computational quantification of our phenotypical expressions. So this combination is an area to watch and very, very interesting.
George Church is doing 100% agree. George Church is doing some amazing experiments now where he's not changing genes through gene editing, but increasing copy number of individual genes, because a lot of our genes are replicated more than once and expressed from multiple loci. And as we age, the products of many of those genes diminish and contribute to the aging process. So he's experimenting with increasing copy number without modifying the genes themselves as a means of combating aging. And that's a fascinating approach that doesn't have so far the consequences of off-target effects of genetic editing attempts.
And when we talk about, I'm sorry, just in closing on the longevity thing, often it's human to just kind of be focused on how long can I live, right? But a part of that conversation should always be the dignity that people have late in life, and just looking out for us, as we do age as a community, because of the social structures are not what they once were. It's an important part of that end of life, or even as you're a senior citizen, things like that. Thanks, Tyler.
David, social community is actually one of the bigger indicators for lifespan, right? So relationships and community. And the other part of that is that these David Sinclair and all these guys are measuring health span versus lifespan. So the idea is to be healthy up until you're 90 and pass away, or extend your lifespan, but it's a healthy span, not a, aging and all the illness and everything else. In fact, David Sinclair sees aging as a disease that can be corrected, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
so you
there
could
age?
develop
Sorry,
therapeutics to tackle it. That's and in the short term, and it really starts in utero. Molecular damage starts right in when you're in the womb. Babies who are born small for date, all of those things are prone to it. So we can just, I would say to everybody here, walk, go, keep moving. That's the key thing. Keep
Plant-based
moving.
diet. Plant-based diet.
And
No, I
I
think you
would
don't need
recommend
plant-based.
blue
We're
food,
omnivores. We're omnivores. We're not herbivores.
Keto diets.
Don't play.
Blue
plant-based
food,
with
aqua,
protein.
fish,
Yes,
everything from
Oh my
ocean,
god.
sea,
Whoever
and the river, and the
Roasted
Don't
land.
iguanas.
doing this.
don't.
Welcome to Japan.
No more
Um.
Sustainability.
Doritos.
Oh wow.
They
But
can
Tyler,
here. She's.
survive.
Let me ask
um,
this abstract
can I
question
ask a
though.
question?
Fasting.
can
How
I?
long do you actually want to live? Because, I think it's like the fable of Cain. Living forever can be seen as a curse. So how long would you actually want to live if you could choose?
Wrong
I
question.
got a quick comment on that because this ties into Cal and money and all that stuff. It's interesting as you have, aging parents, and as you start to assume some of the financial responsibilities of managing, their nest eggs and stuff, and then looking at the folks around you. It's incredible how much money is spent for folks that age and grow beyond the age of 70 or 80 and end up having their homes at risk, and just the cost of that. And when I was looking into franchise opportunities, that is one target area which is just exponentially taken off, which is, as the population ages, the cost of being able um, to provide services for those folks, and as they are forced to move out of their homes and get round the clock nursing care. So that's kind of one of the trade offs of people having an elongated lifespan.
Well, it depends on what you do. I'm 80,
Yes,
so
Dr. Francine, I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah,
I
let's all listen to the experts here and stop
yeah.
piping off of you
Yeah.
youngsters. Yeah.
I'm 80. I am not a drain on the system at all because I do eat a plant-based diet. I do exercise. I walk 10,000 steps a day.
Woohoo.
I do yoga, 4 times a week,
Yay!
and I lift light weights 3 times a week.
You're my
So
hero.
and I sleep and I meditate. And so, yes, I cost the system COVID shots, and I occasionally costed something else. But I'm living in my own home, and I don't see. And I have the only comorbidity I have is high blood pressure, and that has not produced heart disease yet, and is controlled with drugs. And so I have followed all of the health span research. I mean, followed it as in read it all, and then followed it as in put it to use. And I think that there's definitely a huge market for expanded services, but if I were going to go into those services, I would go into the ones that prevent loneliness or communal living or something like that, because I get my kicks from being online, but many people my age don't, and they've been very much forced into depression, even if they're healthy, by not being able to go anywhere because of COVID. So if you're looking for a market opportunity, we have plenty of monitors and we have plenty of remote healthcare options. But what we really need as a group, I think, is modern senior living options like, I don't know. I don't even know what I would do because I don't use any of them. But I know a lot of people who would like to.
And I think importantly, Dr. Francine, you are intellectually active and technologically savvy.
Tyler,
Can I
Yes,
ask a question?
Yeah,
I
didn't
agree.
this
that's
I agree.
conversation?
that's
May
the
Can I
I
whole
ask?
difference.
Can
may
I
I
ask? Did
contribute to
this
the
convers?
effort?
Can I just wanted to ask quickly. Did this conversation start with a fashion resale app or something like that?
Yeah, I
So
mentioned the
that's
the
Yes, it
amazing.
did. Just yes, it did.
Yes, it
can
did.
you just retweet that for me, please? But no, what an amazing conversation from fashion. That's amazing.
Yeah. So there's I forget who sent this one in, but from Nikkei Japan, the headline is "The New Population Bomb. For the first time, humanity's on the verge of a long-term decline." For the past 200 years, rapidly rising population has consumed the Earth's resources, ruined the environment, and started wars. But humanity is about to trade one population bomb for another, and now scientists and policymakers are waking up to a new reality. The world is on the precipice of decline and possible extinction. And it's not a surprise this is coming from Japan, where the population is rapidly in decline. So I will tweet this.
Tyler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tyler, you know that Hans Rosling actually predicted this
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I do. So Hans is the Swede who did the best TED Talks of all time about population demographies and things. So pointing out that modern
I just want to
developed
say something, Tyler.
developed countries have terminal demographies. Yes, Ro?
I just want to say something. Yeah, it was just announced that there's this identical twins in Japan, 107-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Identical twins. They are just awarded the Guinness World Records for the to certify the two Japanese sisters as the world's oldest living identical twins at 107.
Okay.
Just one day ago, it was announced. Congratulations. So, Dr.
Okay.
Francine, you have another 27 years to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. If crypto does well, I can make it.
Yep. And in other good news, Subway sandwiches says August sales were the strongest in 8 years.
Eat fresh.
Subway announced Tuesday the August sales for its U.S. restaurants were its strongest since 2013. Everybody, I told you,
Dr. Francine, do you eat Subway?
people think we're joking.
Never. I I've
It's
never eaten
in the
How
fast
about
food.
how about
Subway
Dunkin'
bread does
Donuts?
not
Tyler
even
said
count
he
it
eats
as
it all the
bread.
time.
Hey Tyler,
Uh,
you need to give them the ingredients for the clubhouse sandwich.
Yeah. There, I see a sponsorship opportunity right there. So the next article is that a startup called Flyer Labs, which uses machine learning to help airlines better predict ticket prices. I thought they themselves set the ticket prices. Why do they need help predicting them? Maybe their competitors' ticket prices. So this startup raises $150 million to use machine learning to help predict airline ticket prices. And then Shenzhen-based High
Wait,
Robotics.
just a quick question. Was that last one, is that for the airlines or is it maybe for
Yes.
consumers?
No, for airlines.
All right, well, that's dumb.
Yep. Shenzhen-based High Robotics, which develops autonomous hardware for warehouses, raises $200 million. And Zest Money, an Indian buy now pay later startup, raises $50 million from an Australian buy now pay later company called Zip. So the buy now pay laters are investing in each other. That's fantastic. And
Did you
Facebook.
tweet out that with airplane tickets?
Did I do what?
Did you tweet out the airplane tickets one? Because this is something that really I'm interested in.
Okay, here it comes. It's called
Thank you, sir.
Flyer Labs. Copy link address. And I'm tweeting it to our Twitter account, TNATW. There it goes. And
Tyler, these solutions already exist. We already have a product. We also sell it to clients. So I don't think they are doing it new. So airline prediction by
they're not
airlines, they
saying it's
already.
new. Yeah, very few. You'll notice we never say any of these are new. That's a well-known point that none of this is new.
So wait, in the vein of like people who are getting money that totally don't deserve it, did you guys see? I don't know if you talked about this before I got in the room, but his name is like Najad Al Nair, the guy who is diamond
Yes,
hands for Bitcoin.
big
So
cloud. Yeah,
did you guys talk about that?
yeah, we did.
And he did this also. So he screwed up two things, and now he's getting money to do what he calls like the new like
Yes.
decentralized social thing. But he's going to mess that up too. How is he getting so much money when there's like people who build actual products and don't screw them up who aren't getting them? I'm just very confused.
I think
What is the
Can we get a
because
conspiracy theory music?
it's not, there's no conspiracy theory in this particular case. He's a former Googler engineer. That means he's generally the checkbooks on the table, and he's working in a space that some investors have a bone to pick about, like Chamath Palihapitiya, who's one of the investors in DSO. He used to be at Facebook, and he thinks Facebook's evil, and he thinks he helped create Facebook, and he thinks Facebook is a cancer on society, and he thinks there needs to be a solution. So here comes along a Google engineer with a solution for decentralized social networks that could be the antidote, the new modern version of what could fix this. And so he writes a check. That's a
And yet,
lot.
BitClout was basically a scam, as far as I can tell. If you look at CoffeeZilla's takedown
Yeah,
the other day, I mean, how do you get rewarded based on what you did with BitClout?
yeah. BitClout has a weakness in that you can't get the money out of that ecosystem. And he's now claiming that that was purely an internal beta test for what he really wants to do, which is a decentralized social network. My point is, in answering Jennifer's question, is how does that person get funding? He gets funding based on a premise of social networks suck, and the person he's pitching it to helped make Facebook, who agrees that Facebook is an actual cancer on society. So, and I happen to have a potential solution to somebody who's eager to find a solution to a problem they helped cause. That's how they got funding.
Hey,
And
Tyler, I know
is
you
there a
one more
beta?
hate
thing.
all lawyers,
Is
but that was, and we all look alike, but that was Alexandra's question.
But Tyler, I'm looking at his LinkedIn profile now. He wasn't in Facebook at all, and he was only in Google for less than 3 years.
I didn't say he was in Facebook. No, the investor
Ah, you
was
didn't
at
Chamath was at
mention.
Facebook.
Facebook. Chamath was at Facebook.
The
But
Ah,
and
investor
one more
was at
Chamath.
thing
Facebook.
Okay.
one more thing I'd add to your thing there, Tyler, which is exactly it. There's just a lot of money out there, just a lot of money right now. I mean, like I
There's
get
a
these
yeah.
guys in
There's
Oxford coming up, like just there's literally like they don't even like they just got nothing. They've got a concept. They're a student, and they want a 5 million valuation. So one, there's that, and then the other thing is people like Chamath, if he wants to solve a problem, whether it's for his own like wanting to prove out something, a hypothesis he's got, or something he's angry about, or something he just thinks is it's a big space. He's going to put the way it works is he's going to take 5 bets, and he's going to take it on people that are wacky, that are out, and maybe they've done some stupid things before. But if they've got some basic things that tick off, it's a portfolio risk for him. So that's why it's not a conspiracy or anything. It's just that's how the money's flowing. It just and so it looks kind of weird when you get a person that's we might think is not credible because of one or two things, but he's within a portfolio risk scenario with somebody else.
yeah. Okay. Next up here.
Tyler, is there any beta version out of any of these social distributed startups?
That's so. What is he calling it? DSO is not out yet.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
So next up here, we've gone through the big headlines, although Microsoft just had their live streaming event where they just unveiled the Surface Duo 2, an 8.3 inch, so the iPhone, the biggest iPhone Pro Max is 6.7. This is 8.3, 90 hertz display, which is not that's what the current iPhone has, iPhone 12, and the new one has 120 hertz. And 3 12-megapixel real cameras, just like the iPhone, Snapdragon 888, very, very similar to what the iPhone's chip has. 5G, Android 11, curved screen for external notification. So Microsoft's not giving up on the hardware. They can't. They have to stay in that race. So then now we get to get into the fun tweets. For example, like this one that Poppy found about the 7 hottest summers in recorded history have all occurred in the last 7 years. So just tweeting that one out. And an amazing airborne microchips that are the tiniest human-built objects to take flight. Aerial microchips could eventually track pollution and disease, floating in the sky like digital pollen.
Hey, John, this is kind of right what we were talking about yesterday, right?
Like helicopter seeds falling slowly towards the ground, these newly created microflyers can catch the wind to achieve unpowered controlled flight. The process is akin to helicopter seeds falling from a maple tree. And that's not a coincidence. The team led by engineer John Rogers studied various plants and trees to understand how nature, after millions of years of evolution, stumbled on some rather excellent solutions for distributing seeds. Wind-blown seeds tend to use one of 4 different strategies: helicopters, flutters, spinners, gliders, or parachutes. And now we're using tech in similar ways. It's quite an interesting one that I just tweeted out here. The next one from Faraz is that in the United Arab Emirates, Payit launches collect payments through WhatsApp in the UAE. Send money via WhatsApp for the first time in the Middle East. So now WhatsApp is adding in the payment layer to become a super app, just like WeChat did in China many years ago. And Joe Williams sends in this one that $5.9 million ransomware attack on farming co-op may cause food shortages. An attack on U.S. farming provider New Cooperative may disrupt the food supply chain. Again, we had the biggest meat company. Are we starting to wonder if these are rogue government bad actors trying to target our food supply chain systems?
Tyler, I'll give the cybersecurity input on that one, which
Go
is
ahead.
that we've said that Biden has said you do not attack critical infrastructure, right? That's going to have us go back at them, and so farming this area is, but this is actually a small player and won't make that big dent. And so what they're doing right now is testing that boundary of where within infrastructure, if it's a smaller company like this, is what they're doing. So no, that's not government backed.
Yeah. So the next one here, Jeff G sends in one from Japan that it's a VR app that allows you to explore a VR version of your intestines. So you can the intestinal miracle theater, experience the fierce battle in your intestines through VR.
Gross.
Yeah,
I'd love to see it after
Seriously?
Chipotle or Subway.
Yeah, especially after a nice footlong.
Yeah, but
So,
imagine the use case if you're getting a colonoscopy done, or your
I was just
surgeon.
going to say
oh
that.
gosh,
It's like being awake during a colonoscopy.
guys, I do have direct experience with this. I thought I had Crohn's.
TMI, Chris. TMI.
Sorry. But they sent one of those camera capsules. You swallow it, and it just goes all the way down, taking pictures the whole time. So,
Yeah,
yay.
colon pills.
I would love a microscopic view and checking all the gut microbiomes with that.
Yep.
Okay, so China just spoke at the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, and Xi Jinping says China will stop financing coal-fired power plants. Let's hope to God will keep to that. That would be fantastic. Australia plans to open its international border by Christmas. That's great news for a lot of folks. And ride-hailing giant Didi denies executive Jean Liu is jumping ship, which that was the headline 24 hours ago, that the co-founder of Didi was leaving, and now Didi's denying it. Okay. Stay tuned on that drama. And the next one's from Jeff G. A record backlog of cargo ships at California ports. Some 65 container ships are stuck outside the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach amid trade bottlenecks.
Seems to be getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. And then, apparently Bill Gates has now addressed Jeffrey Epstein ties. So I'm just tweeting that one out.
Where's Charles?
Yeah, Gates appeared to be caught off guard by a series of questions related to Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein.
They also served Prince Andrew. I don't know if you guys read about
Yes,
that, but
in the past 24
he
hours.
was
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, apparently he had been kind of hiding so that he couldn't be served. But now that he's served, the question is, will he appear in New York courts, or are they trying to get it to happen in London? I think they're trying
But
to
he
get it.
doesn't sweat,
Exactly.
Tyler.
Huh?
He doesn't sweat. His biggest piece of defense is that he says he doesn't sweat, and that couldn't have been him sweating.
Okay, next up, we've got. Oh yeah, Cheryl said the one about the database of 106 million Thailand travelers. Details have been leaked. And Netta sends in this one from Daily Mail UK about the future of firefighting. Students transform a school chair into a manned drone, and it looks like a student flying around in a human-sized drone with a chair. So there's a whole lot of these human-sized flying drones now. Maybe I should get busy and make myself one. We'll do a little Iron Man project.
I better check that out. I hope it's not my son.
A new crowdsourced project attempts to reveal which American politicians own Bitcoin. So a little clever hack lobbying situation to happen there. A new project that sifts through congressional financial disclosures and records and records Bitcoin owners into a database. Very interesting. And then the New York Times has reviewed the new Apple iPhone 13, calling it the most incremental upgrade ever. Ouch, that hurts. The new iPhone is 10% faster than the last one, and the photos are slightly better. In a word, incremental.
In another word, save the planet and don't upgrade.
Speaking of kind of planetary stuff, Netta sends in this one from Daily Mail UK that NASA Psyche spacecraft will be powered by solar electric thrusters, and the spacecraft that will launch to a metal-rich asteroid called Psyche. The asteroid is worth more than $10,000 quadrillion, and in 2022 will be powered by futuristic electronic thrusters emitting a blue glow. So we're going to do some metal-rich asteroid mining to the tune of quadrillions of dollars. So NASA's building this spacecraft with futuristic electric thrusters. And then this next one from Deezen is about Bjarke Ingels, who's kind of like the biggest name in Starchitect, architecture, guru. And he's planning something called a master planet. And the master planet is their plan to redesign Earth and stop climate change. To prove a sustainable human presence on planet Earth is attainable with existing knowledge. Let's hope so. And then BB sends in one from Nikkei Japan that Thailand's biggest oil company, PTT, or Portotor as we call it in Thailand, launches a $16 billion push into EVs and green energy. State-backed company aims to support government's climate change effort. And I said yesterday that Thailand really wants to go huge into lithium and the push into EVs because Thailand is a huge player in car production, the chips for cars, the assembly of cars, and we want to get into the batteries as well. Let's hope we do. And next up, Anna Marie sends in this one that her friend Amy Klobuchar just did an interview. She's the U.S. senator who seems to understand tech far better than anyone or all the rest of them combined, actually. And she's discussing the polarization in Washington, D.C. and the Texas situation. And it's a video interview. So I'm retweeting that one out for everyone to enjoy at the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And then we've got this one from Dr. Fran from TechCrunch, a new app called Eye Gauge, spelled EYE, which checks your eyes. And Eye Gauge is building a database of eye scans for drug testing. And in the example that I just tweeted out, this eye tracking app, it just takes a photo of your eyes and it can tell from your eyes if you should be able to drive or not, if you would be guilty, if you would be caught in trouble on a drug test. It can tell from your eyes if you've had consumed too much of any particular substances, and can warn you not to drive. Very interesting. So the next one is Blizzard's chief legal officer quit amid the big lawsuits happening over there at Activision Blizzard. Blizzard's entertainment chief legal officer, Claire Hunt, has resigned from the embattled company. She announced the news in a LinkedIn post yesterday, saying that last Friday was her final day. Get me the hell out of here. You can't pay me enough to deal with this headache of a dumpster fire. And the next one's from The Verge, about a generation that grew up with Google is forcing professors to rethink lessons plan. It's about how people search for everything through search bars now. And what else do we got? Specialized, the bike maker in America, who I think makes some of the best bikes. Their new next generation turbo e-bikes are basically computers on wheels. And it's one of the best looking e-bikes I've seen yet. Looks great. So just tweeting that out. And Gary Gensler says cryptocurrencies are a highly speculative asset class and need to be regulated in order to protect the stability of the system. Gen Z is so good at trend spotting, they could take over the VC industry. According to Business Insider, Gen Z investors just hosted their first major venture capital event. They may lack banking or business experience, but they know what's cool. Well, that's true of every young generation. And the next one is China's crackdown on its tech industry is India's gain, says venture investor. This came in from Vinay. And I've made that comment here myself, and I think Vinay agrees that the China crackdown is a huge benefit to India. You can have an incredible amount of billions of dollars looking for a new place to invest in Asia, right as India is starting to boom, and China is just becoming rather an unwelcoming place to invest.
That's going to be bigger than that even headline suggests. I mean, right? I mean, it's for the reason you just said, but I mean the sheer magnitude of how that's gonna manifest, as well as is just more investment just here in the West as well. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Next up, the UN Secretary General Antonio from Portugal said that Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson's space trips created a worldwide malady of mistrust. And okay. And he's also in the news in another article I have coming up here. Let me just jump right to it. Here it is. The UN Secretary General says the world is hurtling towards ecological destruction. Climate alarm bells are ringing at fever pitch, calling current global efforts insufficient. UN Secretary General warned the world is hurtling towards ecological destruction, sounding a bleak opening tone at the annual UN General Assembly in New York. And this is the first article I've seen about it from Bloomberg. So it doesn't seem anything can stop us from jumping or flying straight off the cliff. Evan sends in this interesting one from The Guardian about Australian government plan to capitalize on carp orgies because carp is becoming an absolute huge problem of vermin. Like these carp fish, are having carp orgies and are replicating at a rate that is wildly out of control because they eat algae. The water's getting hotter. There's more algae. They're feeding like crazy. They're mating like crazy. It's become a problem. There's too many fish. So obviously, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, let's eat the fish. Well, yeah, you might be able to do that. The problem is they have a lot of bones. So how could we process the carp somehow and give it to somebody? I mean, there's going to be a whole lot of people starving in a lot of places. Australia wants to get rid of these things. So Australian authorities are due to report on the potential to control the vermin, but what to do with hundreds of thousands of tons of rotting fish. And now the plan is to wipe them all out with a herpes virus. Introduce herpes into the carp in their mating orgies.
Yeah, as I said, it's only going to work if they're mating orgies fish.
The next one, India could surpass the UK as the world's 5th largest stock market by 2024. And Silicon Valley's quest to live forever could benefit humanity as a whole. A growing number of tech billionaires have decided they want to use their enormous wealth to try and help humans cheat death, is the article from CNBC. And it's because they're investing in teams like George Church and David Sinclair and all, genetic engineering and longevity, like we were just talking about. And a new report suggests that 75% of dementia cases are undiagnosed, with a tsunami of new diagnoses on the horizon. According to a new report looking at Alzheimer's disease and dementia worldwide, around 75% of all dementia cases are undiagnosed.
Those are really important to put right next to each other, as you did, because somebody had mentioned, I think it was John mentioned, as you're caring for older parents, it's a time when you start to learn a lot more of the end of life dynamics, and I don't think it was stated clearly before, but you don't want to outlive your brain. And so, all the fancy billionaire investments, I'm sure they're doing this, but helping preserve our brain is how it performs is really, it's really the kind of in the driver's seat there. But thanks for sharing them both simultaneously, because it's a really important point.
Here's one that goes along. Wall Street Journal, Apple's working on technology to help diagnose depression and cognitive decline, like dementia, aiming for tools that could help expand the scope of its capabilities using sensors and whatnot. And so hopefully Apple could pre-warn you of any decline in your mental capabilities and potentially offer solutions.
Maybe I don't know if it was in this room or the med tech room, Tyler, yesterday. We had
I
that
shared that
the keyboard.
yesterday.
Thank you. It was a keyboard, I think, and the AI behind the keyboard was part of it, at least in terms of one of the innovations they're looking to deploy.
And NASA announces a landing site for robotic moon rover mission. So now they know where they're going. That's nice. China's gene giant harvests data from millions of pregnant women. Reuters is now reporting on BGI. A prenatal test used worldwide sends gene data of pregnant women to the company that developed it with China's military. And now we covered this one a month ago, and now Reuters is covering it. The company's called BGI. Let's see what Reuters says about it. Yep, there it is. BGI, a Chinese gene company selling prenatal tests around the world, developed them in collaboration with the country's military and is using them to collect genetic data from millions of women for sweeping research on traits of populations. A Reuters review of scientific papers and company statements found. U.S. government advisors warned in March that a vast bank of genetic data that the company, BGI, is amassing and analyzing with AIs could give China a path to economic and military advantage. As science pinpoints new links between genes and human traits, access to the biggest, most diverse set of human genomes is a strategic edge. The technology could propel China to dominate global pharmaceuticals and also potentially lead to genetically enhanced soldiers or engineered pathogens to target U.S. populations or food supplies. The advisors said.
Tyler, is there a real source for this one? Because it sounds to me it's just an advisor, and there's a lot of The reason I ask, I'm quite involved in this space, and they're really careful right now, BGI and also MGI Tech, which is a sister company,
Mm-hmm.
about having any really connection to to digitally connect to the laboratory information systems. They stick to the machine and so forth and keep it. Anyways, I'm just a little I'm quite I'm just doubting a little of the source of this.
The source
Does it
of
say, or is
Reuters.
it just
Yeah, well, so the author for Reuters is Christine Needham and Claire Baldwin, and they're
huh?
quoting a U.S. government advisors warned in March.
Right,
So they don't name the government advisors.
right.
Uh,
So yeah, I mean, BGI, yes, makes the tests. Yes, they make the chemicals. It's the
do,
chems.
so
That's what they do.
do you want to know who the U.S. government advisors that they're referring to
No,
are? What's
no,
the question exactly?
no. There's no question. I'm just kind of doubting the hoopla about it. But anyways, yeah, it's just like where
Well,
do they actually? How do they know that actually is going on? They do the test. Yes, they make the test. But is there connection to the actual individual, like a person number, like a national identity number or something like that? That's the part I'm
uh,
kind of just wondering about.
the third paragraph starts with Reuters has found that BGI's test, one of the most popular in the world, is a source of genetic data for the company. So how they
All
found that,
right.
they don't quite
Yeah,
reveal.
I mean, when I went to BGI, I was there about 10 years ago, and it's pretty amazing. You have like 20 to 25-year-olds publishing on Nature and Science. These are really prestigious, and BGI's background is from the Genome Project. These two guys who left the Genome Project from the States and started out first in Shanghai, and then they left Shanghai because the government was a little too heavy on them and went to Shenzhen, and obviously that probably is also. So there, yes, obviously it could be a link, but I haven't seen a kind of a clear link yet, at least when we've been digging around. But anyways, just curious.
Okay. It says so far more than 8 million women have taken BGI's prenatal test globally. BGI has not said how many of the women took the test abroad and said it only stores location data on women in mainland China. The tests are a private procedure for the women who take them, a component in their routine prenatal care, but the studies show that they yield increasingly potential information for research. One BGI study, for instance, used a military supercomputer to reanalyze NIFTY's data and map the prevalence of viruses in Chinese women, look for indicators of mental illness in them, and single out Tibetan and Uyghur minorities to find links between their genes and their characteristics. The scale of BGI's accumulation of prenatal data and its collaboration with the military in prenatal and neonatal research have not been previously reported. The company has published at least a dozen joint studies on the tests with the People's Liberation Army since 2010, trialing and improving the tests or analyzing the data they provided, the Reuters review found. DNA data collected from prenatal tests on women outside China has also been stored in China's government-funded gene database, one of the world's largest. The company confirmed. BGI, in which the Shenzhen city government and Beijing's largest stake investment vehicle took stakes in 2014, runs the gene bank. Reuters found no evidence BGI violated patient privacy agreements or regulations. However, the privacy policy of the NIFTY's test website says data collected can be shared when it is directly relevant to national security or national defense security in China.
Okay, this goes back to what I talked about with you yesterday. I think about people just want their test done. They don't really think about what happens with it afterwards, even though they kind of basically relinquish all their data for their kids and their whole family, basically.
Hey,
Okay.
Tyler,
Yes.
this is John. I just something just came across the wire from Reuters on, except I can't find it on their website yet. But basically, the Epic CEO says Apple blacklists Fortnite until the exhaustion of all court appeals.
Mm-hmm.
So I did tweet. I did tweet out. You didn't cover this, right? It came out like 10 minutes ago.
No, have not.
So basically, I did tweet out something that is posted online from GameSpot, and that says Fortnite banned on iOS for as long as 5 years, Sweeney says, as he accuses Apple of lying. So it's kind of like an ultimate FU from Apple to say, okay, you guys want to screw around with how we make money on your product. we're just going to say that you guys are blacklisted until this all gets resolved, and it's 5 years of revenue for Epic to potentially lose out on.
Yes. Back to Aslak's questions. It says later towards the middle or bottom of this article that BGI says its COVID tests do not collect patient DNA, but its prenatal tests do. Inside BGI's offices in mainland China, huge screens update in real time as samples harvested from the tests of pregnant Chinese women are uploaded to the China National Gene Bank, according to a scientist who has been inside the Shenzhen facility, and photographs published in Chinese state media. The screens also showed the location of the women. BGI told Reuters the project, known as the Chinese Millionome Database, does not contain data of women outside mainland China. However, online records reviewed by Reuters show that the genetic data of at least 500 women who have taken the nifty test, including some outside of China, are stored in the government-funded China National Gene Bank.
Tyler, could that be because they happened to be at the time living in China and now they're living abroad?
I don't know.
The interesting thing about this is that from epidemiologic purposes, raw genetic data with location of origin is interesting, but in terms of science and biology and understanding the genome, if you don't have corresponding identity linked to the phenome or the health record, or the microbiome or the immunome or the proteome or the metabolome, it doesn't really get you very far with science. So one can only imagine that if the goal is to really create the best genetic science in the world, that in addition to retaining the DNA of pregnant women on this test, they would have to have an identity for that individual that they can then map to other sources of those other omics to really be able to do valuable science. So it would be no surprise if the number of hacks of other omic data globally isn't on the rise.
I
Tyler,
mean, it's possible that. Oh, sorry.
Alexandria can go first.
Yeah, is it possible that? Thank you. The reason that they say they're not violating any privacy rights is because the people who were tested have no privacy rights.
Very likely. Privacy ends where convenience begins.
Or it could be that they gave their consent. We don't know that.
Well, in the world of 10 pages of consent that nobody reads, that's where privacy ends, where convenience begins. Nobody reads those implied or explicit consents. You just check the box and say, "Give me the result of my pregnancy test."
Yep.
I read them.
Okay, Tyler, the tech news around Africa will start in 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. And on
And
another...
Tyler, just
Yeah.
quickly, President Biden just announced that 1.1 billion doses of Pfizer vaccine will be donated from America. So basically, for every one American who's got the vaccine, 3 people around the world will get from America free. I thought that's a pretty impressive.
Sure.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next one up here. Oh, is that the one you just messaged me? Yes. United States.
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you for that. The next one is also a medtech one, that Fitbit and Apple Fitness Tracker data exposed on unprotected database. The exposed records included user data on name, birth date, weight, height, gender, and location. And those two stories kind of go together. What happens when our DNA data gets exposed, as nearly every other data seems to be doing? So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with our abilities and one ability is outpacing the other. Our ability to generate really valuable data is outpacing our ability to protect it. And that the gap is widening on those two. So the problems could multiply. But a very interesting point here. The next one is from our friend Aaron, from the BBC News, that ABBA, who was in the news lately, that ABBA's kind of mastermind, Bjorn, who's one of the 4 members of ABBA and is very well known to Swedes as he's a fellow Stockholmer. Bjorn launches a campaign to fix $600 million music royalty problem. Bjorn launches a campaign to ensure musicians don't miss out on unpaid royalties using NFTs as the solution, which we've talked about here in the past, as Aaron says in his tweet. And we covered the Silicon Valley quest to live forever.
Could we have a room sometime on NFT, ABC of NFT?
Sure.
Please. Yes, please.
Follow
Yeah.
Alexandra.
Yeah, I do that every Thursday. I talk about NFTs every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific is my NFT room. You can ask any questions. We'll usually pick a topic of some sort, like I'll talk about like platforms or pricing or something like that. But you can always ask any question. And I do a DeFi room on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. And again, like we broke down all the different parts of DeFi and how then how a transaction would go through all those parts. And then, you can always ask questions in those rooms. And then I do some news
No,
also. But
I know. I've been to some. What I mean is really basic, simple. Assume you're a 12-year-old kid or a 80-year-old.
Yes, Professor Asif, I'm arranging one with my NFT and Metaverse community under the Arts Club. I'll update you soon. The basic.
Okay, sounds
But
good.
Professor Asif, Alexandra will teach you how to do it legally.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, Cheryl.
it's not
Yeah,
just for
yeah.
That
me. I
is
was just
very
saying. Yeah,
important, okay?
no, it's not just for me. I just think it's an important topic that everyone should know about. And tech news around the world is a perfect platform where 400 people every day come. And so if it was done under this platform, many people will get to hear it. That's why I was saying it's good to do it here or one of the rooms like
It's on
those.
Clubhouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Tyler, if you want to do a room, I'm happy to do it with you. If you're
Cool.
interested, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. No problem.
Of course.
So the Messi is starting the Tech News Africa room here. So if you haven't already, Messi, did she jump out to go start it already? Messi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
No,
gonna
I haven't
jump out
seen it. I
and
was
start.
looking for it.
It's starting
Yeah,
in
I'm
1
jumping
minute.
now and starting. Yay! See you there.
See
You
you
can
there.
start it now, Messi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah,
Sawayawa.
I want to jump through.
And
Okay. Thank
so
you.
while she does that, the last story is from Wired, from Jeff G., how 30 lines of code blew up a 27-ton generator. A secret experiment in 2007 proved that hackers could devastate power grid equipment beyond repair with a file no bigger than a GIF image. Earlier this week, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed an indictment against a group of hackers known as Sandworm. The document charged 6 hackers working for Russia's military intelligence agency, GRU, with computer crimes related to a half-decade of cyber attacks across the globe, from sabotaging the 2018 Winter Olympics in Korea to unleashing the most destructive malware in history in Ukraine. Among those acts of cyber war was an unprecedented attack on Ukraine's power grid in 2016, one that appeared designed to not merely cause a blackout, but to inflict physical damage on electric equipment. And when one cybersecurity researcher named Mike Asante dug into the details of the attack, he recognized a grid hacking idea invented not by Russian hackers, but by the United States government and tested a decade earlier. There you go. Russia trying to screw up the Korean Olympics and cyber attacking the Ukraine prior to taking over Crimea. Nice people, those Russians. So the Messi's going to start the Tech News Africa room here any second, and we're going to
Yeah,
join
it's
you there.
already up.
Already
Yeah,
up. Fantastic.
Cami, are you doing Future Brain still as well? Because we went to start 5 minutes ago.
Oh, no, I'm not. Thank you, though.
Oh, okay, cool.
All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. We will see you over in the Tech News Africa room.